What we're going to do first things first, we're going to cross to The Hague because right now the ICJ are delivering its advisory opinion in respect of the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. So let's join them right away.
eThekwini Municipality is excited to host the Resurgence Conference Durban 2024, an international investment conference themed Moving the Needle Towards Economic Emancipation. The conference will profile Durban as an investment city from the 17th till the 21st of July at Durban ICC. It features exhibitions, conference engagements led by global and local esteemed sectoral experts and several empowerment opportunities. Also featuring the Resurgence Gospel Fest on 20 July, headlined by American gospel legends Shirley Caesar and Bishop Hezekiah Walker. Sharing the global stage with international acts are local gospel stars Dumim Kokstad, Ayandan Tanzi, Oli Mwango, and Mobi Ngumalo. Tickets are available at Ticket Pro.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Shopping sprees, catching flights while others catch feelings, shaking that thing while sipping on some bubbles on a yacht in Dubai. Some call it living soft. You know, njofo. Tune into Sugar Baby Dating, a highly revealing documentary that lifts the lid of the sugar baby dating phenomenon and talks to girls who have a string of rich older men funding their lifestyles and the women that feel damaged by the whole experience. This Thursday at 10 p.m. Is it just a little frivolous fun, or is there a sinister side to sugar baby dating? Channel your inner curiosity with Sugar Baby Dating, 11 July at 10 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Okay, let's now cross live to the ICJ at The Hague for the advisory opinion in respect to the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territories.
As to the argument that the opinion of the court would have an adverse effect on the negotiation framework, the court considers that it is a matter of conjecture on which the court should not speculate. As to the argument that the court does not have sufficient information to enable it to give an advisory opinion, the court considers that it has before it sufficient information to decide legal questions in a manner consistent with its judicial function. As to the argument that the questions are formulated in a biased manner, the court does not consider that the General Assembly intended to restrict the court's freedom to determine these issues. The court will ascertain for itself whether Israel's policies and practices are in violation of the applicable rules and principles of international law before determining the legal consequences of any such violations. Having examined each of these arguments in turn, the court concludes that there are no compelling reasons for it to decline to give the opinion requested by the General Assembly. The court then recalls the general context of the case before turning to the scope and meaning of the questions posed by the General Assembly. In this regard, the court notes that the questions define the material, territorial, and temporal scope of the court's inquiry. With regard to the material scope, questions A identify three types of conduct, which question B describes as policies and practices of Israel. First, the ongoing violation by Israel of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. Second, Israel's prolonged occupation, settlement and annexation of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character, and status of the holy city of Jerusalem. Third, Israel's adoption of related discriminatory legislation and measures. The specific scope of each of these policies and practices is determined later, as the court examined them in turn. Before turning to that examination, the court limits itself to observing a feature common to all of them, namely that the terms of question A assume that these policies and practices are contrary to international law. By virtue of its judicial function, however, the court must itself determine the lawfulness of the policies and practices identified by the General Assembly. In the present case, the court considered that question A required an assessment of the conformity with international law of those policies and practices of Israel identified in the request. The court considers that in its request, the General Assembly has not sought from the court a detailed factual determination of Israel's policies and practices. Therefore, in order to give an advisory opinion in this case, it's not necessary for the court to make findings of fact with regard to specific incidents allegedly in violation of international law. The court need only establish the main features of Israel policies and practices, and on that basis assess the conformity of these policies and practices with international law. In terms of its territorial scope, question A refers to, and I quote, the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, unquote, which encompasses the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. The court notes that the various United Nations organs and bodies frequently make specific reference to the different parts of the occupied Palestinian territory. The court also does so in the present advisory opinion as appropriate. However, the court recalls that from a legal standpoint, the occupied Palestinian territory constitutes a single territorial unit, the unity, contiguity, and integrity of which is to be preserved and respected. Thus, all references in this opinion to the occupied Palestinian territory are references to a single territorial unit. The court further observes that the question mentions measures pertaining to the holy city of Jerusalem. The ordinary meaning of this term is ambiguous and may be subject to multiple interpretations, but the context provides useful clarification in the present case. In light of this context, the court is of view that the question posed by the General Assembly relating to the holy city of Jerusalem is confined to measures taken by Israel in East Jerusalem. In terms of its temporal scope, question A requests the court to take account of measures adopted by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory since 1967. However, the court is not precluded from having regard to facts predating the occupation to the extent that this is necessary for the proper discharge of its judicial function. The court notes that the request for an advisory opinion was adopted by the General Assembly on December 30, 2022, and asked the court to address Israel's, I quote, ongoing, or, I quote again, continuing policies and practices. Thus, the court is of the view that the policies and practices contemplated by the request of the General Assembly do not include conduct by Israel in the Gaza Strip in response to the attack carried out against it by Hamas and other armed groups on October 7, 2023. Question B has two parts. The first part requests the court to assess how the policies and practices of Israel identified by the General Assembly affect the legal status of the occupation. The court observed that the use of the verb affect points to the possibility that such policies and practices may bring about changes to the legal status. However, the scope of the first part of the question depends upon the meaning of the expression legal status of the occupation in the overall context of question B. In the present context, the court is of the view that the first part of question B calls on the court to ascertain the manner in which Israel's policies and practices affect the legal status of the occupation and thereby the legality of the continued presence of Israel as an occupying power in the occupied Palestinian territory. The court observed that both question A and the second part of question B call upon it to determine the legal consequences arising respectively from Israel's policies and practices and from its continued presence as an occupying power in the occupied Palestinian territory. If and to the extent that the court finds that any of Israel's policies and practices or its continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory are contrary to international law, the court indicates that it will examine the legal consequences following from such findings for Israel, for other states, and for the United Nations. Having defined the scope and meaning of the questions posed by the General Assembly, the court must determine the applicable law. The applicability of certain rules of international law in the territory concerned depends on the status of that territory under international law. The court first seeks to ascertain the status of the occupied Palestinian territory under international law and then determines which rules of international law are relevant for answering the questions posed to it by the General Assembly. The question posed by the General Assembly are premised on the assumption that the occupied Palestinian territory is occupied by Israel. In its 2004 advisory opinion on the legal consequences of the construction of a wall in the occupied Palestinian territory, the court set out the circumstances under which a state of occupation is established. The court observed that in the 1967 armed conflict, Israel occupied the territories situated between the Green Line and the former eastern boundary of Palestine under the British mandate, namely the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The court affirmed that subsequent events had not altered the status of the territories in question as occupied territories, nor Israel's status as occupying power. In its whole advisory opinion, the court did not express a view as to the legal status of the Gaza Strip, as the construction of the wall did not affect the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is an integral part of the territory that was occupied by Israel in 1967. Following the 1967 armed conflict, Israel, as the occupying power, placed the Gaza Strip under its effective control. However, in 2004, Israel announced a disengagement plan. According to that plan, Israel was to withdraw its military presence from the Gaza Strip and from several areas in the northern part of the West Bank. By 2005, Israel had completed the withdrawal of its army and the removal of the settlements in the Gaza Strip. The court notes that for the purpose of determining whether a territory remains occupied under international law, the decisive criterion is not whether the occupying power retained its physical military presence in the territory at all times, but rather whether its authority has been established and can be exercised. Based on the information before the court, it considers that Israel remained capable of exercising and continued to exercise certain key elements of authority over the Gaza Strip, including control of the land, sea and air borders, restrictions on the movement of people and goods, collection of import and export taxes, and military control over the buffer zone, despite the withdrawal of its military presence in 2005. This is even more so since October 7, 2023. In light of the above, the Court is of the view that Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip has not entirely released it of its obligations under the law of occupation. Israel's obligations have remained commensurate with the degree of its effective control over the Gaza Strip. The Court then turned to the rules and principles that are relevant for answering the questions put to it. These include the prohibition of the acquisition of territory by threat or use of force, and the right of people to self-determination, which are enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations and also form part of customary international law. Further, international humanitarian law is of particular relevance. Israel's powers and duties in the occupied Palestinian territory are governed by the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war of August 12, 1949, to which I shall refer as the Fourth Geneva Convention, which is applicable in the occupied Palestinian territory, and by customary international law. Pursuant to Article 154 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, that convention is supplementary to the rules contained in Sections 2 and 3 of the Hague Regulations respecting the laws and customs of war and on land annexed to that convention. As the Court has observed in its jurisprudence, the Hague Regulations have become part of customary international law, and they are thus binding on Israel. As regards international human rights law, the Court observed that Israel is party to several legal instruments containing human rights obligations, including the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination of 21 December 1965, to which I shall refer to as CERD, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights of 16 December 1966, to which I shall refer to as the ICESCR, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of 19 December 1966, to which I refer to as ICCPR. The Court recalls that international human rights instruments are applicable in respect to acts done by a state in the exercise of its jurisdiction outside its own territory, particularly in occupied territories. The Court further recalls that the protection offered by human rights conventions does not cease in the case of armed conflict or of occupation. Some rights may be exclusively matters of international humanitarian law, others may be exclusively matters of human rights law, yet others may concern both these branches of international law. Referring to its Wall Advisory opinion, the Court observes that Israel remains bound by the ICCPR and the ICESCR in respect of its conduct with regard to the occupied Palestinian territory. In relation to CERD, the Court notes that the Convention contains no provision expressly restricting its territorial application. On the contrary, several of its provisions impose obligations on state parties that are applicable in territories under their jurisdiction or in relation to individuals within their jurisdiction. This indicates that CERD is also applicable to conduct of a state party which has effects beyond its territory. In the court's view, Israel must comply with its obligations under CERD in circumstances in which it exercises its jurisdiction outside its territory. As several participants in the present proceedings expressed diverging views regarding the relevance of the accords signed in 1993 and 1995 by Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, also known as the Oslo Accords, the Court turns to those agreements. The parties to the Oslo Accord agreed to, and I quote, exercise their powers and responsibility pursuant to the Accords with due regard to internationally accepted norms and principles of human rights and the rule of law. End of quote. The Court recalls that it considered in its sworn opinion that the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people recognized in the Oslo Accords includes the right to self-determination. The Court observed that in interpreting the Oslo Accords, it's necessary to take into account Article 47 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which provides that the protected population shall not be deprived of the benefits of the Convention, and I quote, by any agreement concluded between the authorities of the occupied territories and the occupying power. End of quote. For all these reasons, the Court considers that these accords cannot be understood to detract from Israel's obligations under the pertinent rules of international law applicable in the occupied Palestinian territory. The Court then assesses the conformity of Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory as identified in Question A with its obligations under international law. In particular, the Court's analysis examines in turn the question of the prolonged occupation, Israel's policy of settlement, the annexation of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, and its adoption of related legislation and measures that are allegedly discriminatory. The Court appraises whether, and if so, how Israel's policies and practices affect the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination after those other questions have been considered. With regard to the question of prolonged occupation, the Court notes that Question A concerns in part the legal consequences arising from Israel's, again, quote-unquote, prolonged occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory. In this regard, the Court notes that Israel's occupation has lasted for more than 57 years. In order to answer this aspect of the question, the Court must turn to the relationship between Israel as the occupying power and the protected population of the occupied territory, which is governed by the law of occupation. By virtue of its status as an occupying power, a state assumes a set of powers and duties with respect to the territory over which it exercises effective control. In this context, the occupying power bears a duty to administer the territory for the benefit of the local population. The nature and scope of these powers and duties are always premised on the same assumption, that occupation is a temporary situation to respond to military necessity, and it cannot transfer title of sovereignty to the occupying power. The fact that an occupation is prolonged does not in itself change the legal status under international humanitarian law. Although premised on the temporary character of the occupation, the law of occupation does not set temporal limits that would as such alter the legal status of the occupation. Instead, the legality of the occupying power's presence in the occupied territory must be assessed in light of other rules. In particular, occupations consist of the exercise by a state of effective control in foreign territory. In order to be permissible, therefore, such exercise of effective control must at all times be consistent with the rules concerning the prohibition of the threat or use of force, including the prohibition of territorial acquisition resulting from the threat or use of force, as well as with the right of to self-determination. Therefore, the fact that an occupation is prolonged may have a bearing on the justification under international law of the occupying power's continued presence in the occupied territory. It is against this background that Israel's policies and practices, as well as its continuing presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, must be examined. The Court now turned to these policies and practices, beginning with Israel's settlement policy. Question A, posed by the General Assembly, inquires in part about the legal consequences arising from Israel's settlement policy. The Court considered in this regard that the distinction that is sometimes made between settlements and outposts is immaterial for the purpose of ascertaining whether the communities in question form part of Israel's settlement policy. What matters is whether they are established or maintained with Israel's support. The Court further notes that between 1967 and 2005, Israel's settlement policy was carried out in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. Since the removal of Israel's settlement from the Gaza Strip in 2005, Israel's settlement policy has continued in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The Court therefore limits its analysis to Israel's ongoing settlement policy in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. At the same time, the Court observes that Israel's settlement policy carried out in the Gaza Strip until 2005 was not substantially different from the policy that continues in the West Bank and East Jerusalem today. In its sworn advisory opinion, the Court found that Israel's settlement policy was in breach of the 6th paragraph of Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention, which provides that, I quote, "The occupying power shall not deport or transfer part of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies." End of quote. In the Court's view, there is nothing in the terms or the context of the provision or in the object and purpose of the drafting history of the 4th Geneva Convention to suggest that that provision prohibits only the forcible transfer of part of the occupying power's civilian population into the occupied territory. In the present case, there is extensive evidence of Israel's policy of providing incentives for the relocation of Israeli individuals and businesses into the West Bank, as well as for its industrial and agricultural development by settlers. There is also evidence that Israel regularly legalizes outposts that have been established in contravention of domestic Israeli legislation, and that Israel's construction of settlements is accompanied by special designed civilian infrastructure in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which integrates the settlement into the territory of Israel. In light of the above, the Court considers that the transfer by Israel of settlers to the West Bank and East Jerusalem, as well as Israel's maintenance of their presence, is contrary to Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention. The Court further notes that the expansion of Israel's settlement in the West Bank and East Jerusalem is based on the confiscation or requisitioning of large areas of land. Observing that, in the present case, the public property confiscated or requisitioned for the development of Israeli settlements benefits the civilian population of settlers to the detriment of the local Palestinian population, the Court concludes that Israel's land policies are not in conformity with Articles 46, 52, and 55 of the Hague Regulations. The Court next turned to the question of the exploitation of natural resources. It recalled that under the principle of customary international law contained in Article 55 of the Hague Regulations, the occupying power shall be regarded only as administrator and usufructuary of natural resources in the occupied territory, including but not limited to forest and agricultural estates, and it shall safeguard the capital of these resources. Therefore, the use by the occupying power of natural resources must not exceed what is necessary for the purposes of the occupation. In this connection, the Court observed that the occupying power had the continuing duty to ensure that the local population has an adequate supply of foodstuffs, including water. Moreover, the use of natural resources in the occupied territory must be sustainable and it must avoid environmental harm. On the basis of the evidence before it, the Court considers that Israel's use of the natural resources in the occupied Palestinian territory is inconsistent with its obligations under international law. By diverting a large share of the natural resources to its own population, including settlers, Israel is in breach of its obligation to act as an administrator or usufructuary. The Court further considers that by severely restricting the access of Palestinian population to water that is available in the occupied Palestinian territory, Israel acts inconsistently with its obligation to ensure the availability of water in sufficient quantity and quality. In light of its analysis, the Court also concludes that Israel's policy of exploitation of natural resources in the occupied Palestinian territory is inconsistent with its obligation to respect the Palestinian people's right to permanent sovereignty over natural resources. Turning next to the question of the extension of Israeli law to the occupied Palestinian territory, the Court recalled that under Article 43 of the Hague Regulations, the occupying power must in principle respect the law in force in the occupied territory unless absolutely prevented from doing so. In principle, then, the law of occupation does not deprive the local populations, civilian institutions in the occupied territory of the regulatory authority that they may have. Rather, it invests the occupying power a set of regulatory power on an exceptional basis and on specific enumerated grounds. Based on the evidence before it, the Court observed that Israel has expanded its sphere of regulation in the West Bank. It's note in particular that Israel has, to a large degree, substituted its military law for the local law in force in the occupied Palestinian territory at the beginning of the occupation in 1967. Moreover, regional and local councils of settlers have assumed de facto jurisdiction over the settlements in the West Bank. In East Jerusalem, domestic Israeli law has been applied since the beginning of the occupation in 1967, and Israel treats East Jerusalem as its own national territory. Where Israeli law is applied in full and to the exclusion of any other domestic legal system, where Israeli law is applied in full and to the exclusion of any other domestic system. In the present case, the Court is not convinced that the extension of Israel's law to the West Bank and East Jerusalem is justified under any of the grounds laid down in the second paragraph of Article 64 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Furthermore, the comprehensive application of Israeli law in East Jerusalem, as well as its application in relation to settlers throughout the West Bank, cannot be deemed, quote-unquote, essential for any of the purposes enumerated in the second paragraph of Article 64 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. For these reasons, the Court considers that Israel has exercised its regulatory authority as an occupying power in a manner that is inconsistent with the rule reflected in Article 43 of the Hague Regulations and Article 64 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. The Court then turned to the effects of Israel's settlement policy on the departure of the Palestinian people. The court observed that the large-scale confiscation of land and the deprivation of access to natural resources divest the local population of their basic means of subsistence, thus inducing their departure. Furthermore, a series of measures taken by Israeli military forces has exacerbated the pressure on the Palestinian population to leave parts of the occupied Palestinian territory against their will. The court recalls that under the first paragraph of Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, I quote, individual or mass forcible transfers, as well as deportations of protected persons from occupying territory to the territory of the occupying power or to that of any other country, occupied or not, are prohibited regardless of their motive. End of quote. In this regard, the court considered that transfer may be forcible and thus prohibited under Article 49, paragraph 1, not only when it is achieved through the use of physical force, but also when the people concerned have no choice but to leave. Further, the court notes that to be permissible, evacuations are conceived as a temporary measures to be reversed as soon as the imperative military reasons subside. By contrast, evacuations of a permanent or indefinite character breach the prohibition of forcible transfer and therefore are not covered by the exception set out in the second paragraph of Article 49. The court considers that Israel's policies and practices, including its forcible evictions, extensive house demolitions, and restrictions on residence and movement, often leave little choice to members of the Palestinian population living in Area C, but to leave their area of residence. The nature of Israel's acts, including the fact that Israel frequently confiscates land following the demolition of Palestinian property for reallocation to Israeli settlements, indicates that its measures are not temporary in character and therefore cannot be considered as permissible evacuations under the Fourth Geneva Convention. In the court view, Israel's policies and practices are contrary to the prohibition of forcible transfer of the protected population under Article 49, paragraph 1 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. The court further notes that Israel's settlement policy has given rise to violence by settlers and security forces against Palestinians. Having examined the evidence before it, in light of the relevant provisions of international law, the court considered that the violence by settlers against Palestinians, Israel's failure to prevent or to punish it effectively, and its excessive use of force against Palestinians contribute to the creation and maintenance of a coercive environment against Palestinians. In the present case, on the basis of the evidence before it, the court is of the view that Israel's systematic failure to prevent or to punish attacks by settlers against the life or bodily integrity of Palestinians, as well as Israel's excessive use of force against Palestinians, is inconsistent with its obligations. In light of the above, the court reaffirms, as it did in its sole advisory opinion, that the Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the regime associated with them have been established and are being maintained in violation of international law. The court notes with grave concern a report that Israel's settlement policy has been expanding since the court's sole advisory opinion. In particular, in December 2022, Israel Parliament approved the establishment of an additional minister within the Ministry of Defense, vested with the governing powers in the West Bank, including land designations, planning, and coordination of demolitions, which would expedite the approval process for new settlements. Also, the size of existing Israeli settlements expanded from November 1, 2022 to October 31, 2023, at a significant rate, with approximately 24,300 housing units within existing Israeli settlements in the West Bank being advanced or approved, including approximately 9,670 in East Jerusalem. The Court observed that the question posed by the General Assembly refers in part to the legal consequences arising out of Israel's alleged annexation of the occupied Palestinian territory. In order to respond to this aspect of the question, the Court must first analyze the concept of annexation. Second, the Court examines Israel's policies and practices with a view to determining whether they amount to annexation. Finally, the Court discusses the lawfulness of Israel's policies and practices. With regard to the concept of annexation, in the present context, the Court understands that to mean the forcible acquisition by the occupying power of the territory that it occupies, namely its integration into the territory of the occupying power. Annexation then presupposes the intent of the occupying power to exercise permanent control over the occupied territory. The Court recalls in this regard that under the law of occupation, the control of the occupied territory by the occupying power must be temporary in character. Consequently, conduct by the occupying power that displays an intent to exercise permanent control over the occupied territory may indicate an act of annexation. The assertion by the occupying power of permanent control of the occupied territory may manifest itself in a variety of ways. In this connection, the Court notes that a distinction between de jure and de facto annexation is occasionally made. Although differing in terms of the means through which the annexation is carried out, both types of annexation share the same objective: the assertion of permanent control over the occupied territory. Against this background, the Court must examine whether, through its conduct, Israel establishes its permanent control over the occupied Palestinian territory in a manner that would amount to annexation. The Court first examines Israel's policies and practices in relation to Jerusalem. It notes that Israel has applied its domestic law in East Jerusalem since its occupation in 1967. In 1980, Israel enacted domestic legislation in the form of a basic law proclaiming East Jerusalem as part of its capital. Israel has asserted that East Jerusalem is part of its territory, as evidenced by the notification of the Israeli government to the Secretary General of the United Nations, according to which, and I quote, "Jerusalem is not in any part occupied territory, is the sovereign capital of the State of Israel." End of quote. The absentee property law of 1950 has facilitated the confiscation of absentee property and its use for the expansion of Israeli settlements in and around the historical borders of the city. It's reported that approximately 230,000 persons live in 14 settlements established in East Jerusalem. The Court considers that Israel's measures in East Jerusalem create an inhospitable environment for the Palestinian population. Because Israel treats East Jerusalem as its own territory, it regards Palestinians residing there as foreigners, and it requires that they hold a valid residence permit. Israeli law has also put in place a building permit scheme, the violation of which results in demolition through an expedited procedure as well as steep fines. According to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Israel's process of land ownership registration is pursued in areas of Israeli settlement expansion, which would increase Israeli control over additional territory in East Jerusalem. Turning to Israel's settlement policy in the West Bank, the Court observed that pursuant to the basic law of 2018, the State of Israel, I quote, views the development of Jewish settlement as a national value and shall act to encourage and promote its establishment and consolidation, end of quote. The displacement of the local population from the occupied territory, which sustains Israel's settlement policy, also advances the integration of the territory. Israel policies and practices induce the departure of the Palestinian population from parts of the occupied Palestinian territory, notably from East Jerusalem and Area C in the West Bank. This in turn enables the further expansion of Israel's settlement policy and the ready integration of Palestinian territory into Israel. The court also recalls that Israel's practice of exploitation of the natural resources in the West Bank is inconsistent with the right of the Palestinian people to permanent sovereignty over natural resources. Israel's extension of its domestic law to the West Bank, notably to the settlements and over settlers, as well as its assumption of broader regularity powers by virtue of the prolonged character of the occupation, entrenches its control over the occupied territory. Policies, practices, and other measures that are such as to bring the occupied territory into the occupying powers' permanent control constitute acts of annexation. Having examined Israel's policies and practices, both in relation to East Jerusalem and to the West Bank, with a view to determining whether they amount to annexation, the Court comes to the conclusion that Israel's policies and practices, including the maintenance and expansion of settlements, the construction of associated infrastructure and the wall, the exploitation of natural resources, the proclamation of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the comprehensive application of Israeli domestic law in East Jerusalem, and its extensive application in the West Bank, entrench Israel's control of the occupied Palestinian territory, notably of East Jerusalem and of Area C of the West Bank. These policies and practices are designed to maintain in place indefinitely, to remain in place indefinitely and to create irreversible effects on the ground. Consequently, the Court considered that these policies and practices amount to annexation of large parts of the occupied Palestinian territory. It is the view of the Court that to seek to acquire sovereignty over an occupied territory, as shown by the policies and practices adopted by Israel in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, is contrary to the prohibition of the use of force in international relations and its corollary principle of the non-acquisition of territory by force. The manner in which the annexation affects the legal status of the occupation and thereby the legality of the continued presence of Israel is discussed later in the advisory opinion. The Court then examined the question of discriminatory legislation and measures. Recalling the wording of question A and the conclusion it reached with regard to the interpretation of the question, it noted that it must itself determine whether the legislation and measures identified by the request of the General Assembly are discriminatory. In this regard, the Court first considers that it has to limit its analysis to legislation and measures that are closely linked to the policies and practices discussed previously. Second, the question covers Israel's legislation and measures only to the extent that they apply in the occupied Palestinian territory. Third, the question is confined to the potentially discriminatory character of Israel's legislation and measures. Having thus defined the scope of question A, the Court turned to the concept of discrimination. It considers that common to all of the relevant provisions of international law is the concept of differential treatment between persons belonging to different groups. It observed in this connection that the existence of the Palestinian people is not at issue. Therefore, in the Court's view, differential treatment of Palestinians can give rise to discrimination. In order to answer question A, the court first examines the effects that Israel's residence permit policy in East Jerusalem has on Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory. The court then turned to the restrictions imposed by Israel on the movement of Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory. Finally, it examines Israel's practice of demolition of Palestinian properties in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, both with regard to the practice of punitive demolition and demolitions for lack of a building permit. The court notes that in that connection, that it's reported that almost 11,000 Palestinian structures have been demolished since 2009. The court concludes from the evidence presented to it and on the basis of its analysis that a broad array of legislation adopted and measures taken by Israel in its capacity as an occupying power treat Palestinians differently on grounds specified by international law. The court notes that this differentiation of treatment cannot be justified with reference to reasonable and objective criteria, nor to a legitimate public aim. Accordingly, the court is of the view that the regime of comprehensive restrictions imposed by Israel on Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory constitutes systematic discrimination based on inter alia, race, religion, or ethnic origin in violation of Article 2, Paragraph 1 and 26 of the ICCPR, Article 2, Paragraph 2 of the ICESCR, and Article 2 of CERD. A number of participants have argued that Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory amount to segregation or apartheid in breach of Article 3 of CERD. Article 3 of CERD provides as follows, I quote, "States parties particularly condemn racial segregation and apartheid and undertake to prevent, prohibit, and eradicate all practices of this nature in territories under their jurisdiction." This provision refers to two particularly severe forms of racial discrimination, racial segregation, and apartheid. The court observed that Israel's legislation and measures imposed and serve to maintain a near complete separation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem between the settler and Palestinian communities. For this reason, the court considers that Israel's legislation and measures constitute a breach of Article 3 of CERD. Having found that Israel's settlement policy, its acts of annexation, and its related discriminatory legislation and measures are in breach of international law, the court turned to the aspect of question A that inquires as to the effects of Israel's policies and practices on the exercise of the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. The court has already affirmed in its sworn opinion the existence of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. In the present proceedings, the court first determines the scope of this right and then examines the effects, if any, that Israel's policies and practices have on its exercise.
So we just pause for a moment. I mean, normally we would take the news at 4 o'clock, but my name's Ashraf Garda, and this is the National Pulse. As you can hear, clearly a break from normal programming is what we're doing right now, and we've done that since 3 o'clock. We've crossed live to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. They are currently delivering its advisory opinion in respect to the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. This in response to a recommendation by the National Assembly of the United Nations. So let's cross back to the ICJ at The Hague.
That Israel's unlawful policies and practices are in breach of Israel's obligation to respect the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. The manner in which these policies affect the legal status of the occupation and thereby the legality of the continued presence of Israel in the occupied territory is discussed later. Je vais donner lecture de la suite.
I shall now continue reading the rest of the opinion in French. The court then turns to the first part of question B, on which the General Assembly requested its opinion and examines whether, and if so, the manner in which, the policies and practices of Israel have affected the legal status of the occupation in light of the relevant rules and principles of international law. It begins by further determining the scope of the first part of question B posed by the General Assembly. In this regard, the Court considers that the first part of question B posed by the General Assembly is not whether the policies and practices of Israel affect the legal status of the occupation as such. Rather, the Court is of the view that the scope of the first part of the second question concerns the manner in which Israel's policies and practices affect the legal status of the occupation, and thereby the legality of the continued presence of Israel as an occupying power in the occupied Palestinian territory. This legality is to be determined under the rules and principles of general international law, including those of the Charter of the United Nations. The Court has determined that Israeli policies and practices and the manner in which they are implemented and applied on the ground have significant effects on the legal status of the occupation through the extension of Israeli sovereignty to certain parts of the occupied territory, their gradual annexation to Israeli territory, the exercise of Israeli governmental functions and the application of its domestic laws therein, as well as through the transfer of a growing number of its own nationals to those parts of the territory, and impeding the exercise of the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people. The Court is of the view that Israel...
Okay, we're just fading out from there. That's at the ICJ at The Hague, because they're saying the same things now in French. So what we'll do then is we're going to get commentary, analysis on what has been said so far in the English testimony that came through in terms of the recommendations early on. But before that, let's go first things first now to the 4 o'clock news at 3 minutes past 4 with Madupi.
Could you be paying less for your car insurance? Outsurance has comprehensive cover with all the bells and whistles. An essential cover for cars older than 5 years under 125,000 Rand that aren't financed.
I am Flip. I'm from Vredendal. I'm 54 years old. I'm only paid 267 Rand for my 2005 Ford Ranger from Outsurance Essential.
Whether you choose comprehensive or essential cover, Outsurance will make sure you don't pay more than you have to for car insurance. SMS out to 30754 now. Even if you just save a few hundred rands a month, it could add up to thousands a year.
Hi, I'm Lorraine. I'm 31 from Durbanville. I pay 770 Rand a month for my 2023 Toyota Corolla Cross from Outsurance Comprehensive.
Do it now. Go to outsurance.co.za for a 10-minute quote that could save you thousands. Licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
The world's best cooking show is coming to S3. MasterChef South Africa Season 5. You'll meet 20 talented home cooks from around Mzansi, Noma Upumaphi, and no matter your favorite dish. See if the chefs can handle the heat in the kitchen in a race to be crowned MasterChef South Africa. Starts Saturday 13 July at 7:30 p.m. on S3, Channel 193. MasterChef South Africa, proudly sponsored by Pick n Pay.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse, weekdays 3 to 6 p.m.
So we will get to the delayed news as soon as we can. I mean, things have shifted because of the International Court of Justice delivering its advisory opinion in respect of the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territories, right? So up to now, the Judge Nawaf Salam, the president of the court, has been reading out the advisory opinion in English. We've been covering all of that. I understand now they've swapped to French. So what we'll do, the plan is we'll cross to the news as soon as we can. That's one thing. The second part of it is that we will then get opinion, certainly from the SABC reporter who covers international news, and that is Sophie McQuena, to get her thoughts. And then you certainly can give your opinions as well in terms of what you've just heard. Now, the actual text of what has been said is going to come through shortly, but the overall sense of what has happened here is significant in that the ICJ, in terms of my understanding, have advised, because that's really what it is, an advisory, they've advised that Israel's settlement policies and exploitation of natural resources in the Palestinian territories were in breach of international law. That is my understanding, but we'll get more. The ICJ advises that Israel's settlement policies and exploitation of natural resources in the Palestinian territories were in breach of international law. Okay, what we'll do is we'll get Sophie McQuena to talk to us right after this.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
In fact, I think we do have, we're going to first go to the news. I'm just double checking that. No, we're not. Just bear with me with these changes, because this is what happens when you have, when we cross into live events around the world. We shuffle and change literally minute by minute. Okay. So news will come up later. What we do have now is Sophie McQuena, right? Sophie, good chatting to you, and thanks for joining us on the National Pulse.
Thank you, Ashraf.
I have to tell you just quickly, and this is interesting considering my tweet of yesterday with yourself and Victor Komishwana, right? I bumped into him today. I thought I should just tell you that. I said, you see what happens? Be careful what you tweet. One day later, you meet the person that you tweet about. So I thought, well, that was quite fun. Anyway, let's get on to more serious and more significant issues with regard to the ICJ advisory. Give us some key points that's emerged in terms of this advisory.
Well, clearly the ICJ is in agreement with the UN committee led by Dr. Navi Pillay that argued that the Israel settlements in Palestine are in violation of international law. The court had to agree or not to agree with that characterization or the legal perspective as pronounced or as pointed out by that team. And therefore, I mean, they went as far as explaining why arrive at a similar characterization of the situation there. I mean, you can't have these settlements, the oppression of the Palestinians in the 60s and up to today. They are still oppressed and they cannot have access to facilities, resources. What hurts most is the fact that the resources of Palestine, they are not benefiting. Israel is looting the resources of Palestine, both in the sea, in land, and also obstruction in relation to air, to access that country.
Are you able to give us like some of the key bullet points that were, because of course, you know, in terms of the advisory, that was done for an hour and that's just so much, right? But I mean, some of the key bullet points, specific points that were mentioned?
Israel's policy amounts to segregation and apartheid policy. That's what they are saying in relation to Article 3. And also Israel is violating the rights of the Palestinians for self-determination. And the other issue, as I pointed out, the almost looting of the resources of Palestine and with the Palestinians not really benefiting amounts to violation of international law, because as an occupier, you have to protect the people in that country and their resources, because you can't go there and be an occupier and extend the harassment of the people while you claim that you are there to hunt the terrorists, or you are looking at people who have attacked you. And therefore, I think it is a judgment that Navi Pillay will be happy about.
Okay. I see.
Even though they are still continuing.
Amongst the other points made was that, the ICJ concluding that Israel's policies and practices are designed to remain in place, and that means to continue, and they amount to annexation. And that's significant too in the light of the ongoing debate that's continued for decades with regard to Israel and Palestine, right?
Yes, because evacuations are supposed to be temporary, but they are not able to go back. So now you have a large portion of Palestine under occupation, and it's not ending there. It looks like it's getting smaller in terms of the land for the Palestinians. And I think the court has arrived at what Navi Pillay said, and I think she will be a happy person, particularly if you can speak to her. Maybe to Monday, you will get a better analysis in terms of what came out. I don't think today Benjamin Netanyahu will be happy with this, as we know that there are reports that in 2 weeks, we are likely going to see the International Criminal Court making a pronouncement in terms of that warrant of arrest that's been proposed by the chief prosecutor against Netanyahu, some Hamas members, and some generals. So pressure is piling up, and I don't know, he is supposed to go to America next week, Benjamin Netanyahu, to even address the Congress. America is in a mess as we speak. I can't see him going there, and he's even scared to travel because he has to refuel and pass in other countries, and therefore he's scared of arrest.
Okay. And in terms of the word apartheid, was the word apartheid actually used in terms of the ICJ finding that the occupation is apartheid?
Israel's policies amount to the segregation or apartheid, and it is linked to this because of the Article 3. In terms of what is happening.
I understand. Now, just give us some context here. This advisory came about because of what happened at the National Assembly at the United Nations, right? So what happened first? What did they do at the UN that has then forced this arm, the ICJ, to respond with this advisory?
The UN appointed a team led by Navi Pillay to go and investigate the violation of human rights, violation of international law, and come and explain, including the settlements. Now, they went back, they gave a report that was very harsh on Israel, saying that those settlements are in violation of international law. Now, the UN said some members wanted more clarification. How did you arrive at the fact that these are in violation of international law? And therefore, the request was that the ICJ must look at the report and the presentation of that committee and also make more investigation and come up with explain the context in terms of what is happening with settlements.
And talking
legal
and talking of context, and this has nothing to do with the South Africa case on genocide.
No.
This was, I understand, was done even well before that, right?
It was done well before that, even before the terrible incident of October. It was well before then. It was already in the hands of the International Court of Justice. Okay. Remember, the South African case, they did hear the case quickly because there was an urgency. But this one, it was not an urgent matter, so they took time to come back. But we always knew that there was something already on the table. And I remember speaking to Professor Tladi, who is now a judge there, when he got that nod to be in that court, saying that his first job will be to preside over this case of Navi Pillay, seeking clarity. So it was there. It has been there.
All right. Just to end up, since it's an advisory, right? So it's not binding, I understand. What does this advisory mean in this context, and what happens next?
The UN must decide in terms of accepting the advice they got. And people might say it's not binding, but it affects the credibility of Israel, because many people didn't even know some of these issues. If you were watching the court giving an answer to that request of legal interpretation, what came out was very, very disturbing in terms of how can a country that once suffered so much become what it was against when it suffered during the First World War.
Let's see what then happens with the UN. So the ball very much now in the UN court. Sophie McQueen, I appreciate your time. Much appreciated then, right? Your thoughts as callers, what do you make of what you've just heard? We'll certainly recap on that as well further on just now. I understand that the South Africa's International Department of International Relations, that is DIRCO, they said they will issue a statement on this issue ASAP. So we'll certainly pick up on that. But to call in, you can do that to 086 000 2032 and WhatsApp. Text or voice notes 0614 104 107. As always, you can also add your comments on our social media platforms, on the X or Twitter platform, as well as on Facebook. Tag SAFM Radio, tag me, Ashraf Garda. Do use the hashtag The National Pulse. And I look forward to picking up your conversations and your thoughts, not just on this issue, but some of the other big issues, including, of course, what happened last night at the opening of Parliament.
The Rockets and Umkhonto Kashaga will speak a different language from Siswati and Isindebele when they meet at the office made of grass. They both understand that only victory will impress their fans. This is the Mpumalanga Premiers International Cup 2024. Experience the thrilling encounter between the highly inspired Tears Galaxy and Eswatini champions Mbabane Swallows FC on Saturday, 20 July at 8 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on TTT Channel 4 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Tickets are available at CompuTicket. Proudly brought to you by the TS Galaxy Foundation and SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Every year, 30,000 missionaries are called to serve the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints across the globe, the largest full-time missionary force of any church. Most are under 25 and away from home for up to 2 years, and the biggest training center in Europe is located in Chorley, Lancashire. The Mormons Are Coming follows the journey of 3 young missionaries through the first few months of training and work in the field, which can make or break them. Tune into The Mormons Are Coming, Thursdays at 10 p.m. Channel your best dockies with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
You are listening to The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
Right, we'll talk about many other issues in talking to Party the Hotline as well later on. We've had to shuffle and change many of the issues today. We'll also look at the issue in terms of the police update from KZN regarding important issues around crime, including what clearly appears to have been an attempted hit in this case here for the SARS lawyer advocate Corathon Nodiers. In the last heard, of course, she was shot, but is in hospital in a critical condition. That's what I last heard, and we'll certainly get an update on that too. Let's, however, then move on to other issues in terms of reaction responses from Parliament and some specific issues, not just at Parliament, but certainly what happened today in terms of the initial reaction to President Ramaphosa's speech. So one of the reactions is from Neil Coleman. He's the Senior Policy Specialist at the Institute for Economic Justice. Neil, it's always good chatting to you. You're on the National Pulse. Hello.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Good to chat.
Thank you. Right. So, of course, I mean, you would look at what or listen to what the president says yesterday, certainly from where you are, which is, and as your organization called itself, the Institute for Economic Justice. And you would look at it through that prism, I would expect, right? What's come out of it for you?
Yeah, thanks, Ashraf. I think, the question on everybody's minds at the moment and last night was, we're now in a new political terrain. So in terms of the government of national unity, what is actually going to be possible? What is going to emerge between the coalition partners? And is real change and transformation going to be possible in this political situation. So it was very much of a honeymoon speech. I think there was a feel-good atmosphere to a large extent, although that atmosphere is sort of broken down today in the debate to an extent. But I think what South Africans are looking for is not rhetoric about issues that have been repeated many, many times over the years, but what real progress is going to be made. And I think that's what we and others, like-minded South Africans, are going to be looking for. So on, economic issues, obviously, questions of industrial transformation, diversification of the economy, beneficiation, all these things are issues which have been raised repeatedly over the years. The question now is what is going to be the pace of transformation. Sorry.
No, carry on. I was going to just say that you have a particular interest around grants, and I know that, right? Perhaps let's get to that, yeah?
Yeah. So on the issue of grants, we came into the speech following a very worrying statement by the Minister of Finance after the Cabinet Lekgotla, in which he said that a basic income grant or basic income support was not on the table. The Finance Minister and Treasury itself, the bureaucrats, have consistently over the last number of years been ideologically opposed to the notion of basic income, as well as the social relief of distress grant, which they've tried to terminate on multiple occasions. So when a Treasury official last week had spoken at a World Bank webinar, he had said basically that they intend to replace or would like to replace the SRD grant with a much narrower grant. And therefore this led us to be extremely concerned as to what the Lekgotla had said. However, the President last night was quite clear that the SRD grant, which between 8 and 10 million people rely on, would not only continue, but it would serve as the basis for a system of basic income support, as we called it, which is basically the same idea as the basic income grant. The issue, though, is that the devil is in the detail. When is this going to happen? What is the system going to look like? We've been hearing about the intention to table a policy on this for several years now, and this hasn't materialized. And at the same time, Ashraf, some listeners will be aware that there are major problems which beneficiaries are experiencing, with millions, literally millions, it's not an exaggeration, having been excluded from this grant, and with the grant, as I've spoken about before on your show, having lost real value as it hasn't been increased. So, the President and the ANC before have undertaken to ensure that these problems with access to the grant are dealt with, and that the value is increased to at least the food poverty line. And this was the undertaking made in the election. So this is what we really want to see. We want to see specifics about how that is going to be done, when it's going to be done, and, beneficiaries really now are pretty desperate.
Okay, so as you quite rightfully say, details will come, right? But so now, maybe just the last thing for now, are you saying that you were, having been skeptical yourself based upon what you had heard in the days leading up to last night's address, you've been pleasantly surprised with regard to the issues of various aspects of these grants?
Yeah. It was encouraging what the President said. I wouldn't say I'm surprised, because he's a champion of this issue, and he has repeatedly stated that he's committed to it. But there is this bifurcation or this schizophrenia within government, with the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing, with Treasury, mobilizing constantly against it, and with the presidency saying something different. So they need to end this, speculation and come out clearly with timelines as to when it's going to be implemented. The ANC said that the basic income policy or system will be implemented within 2 years of the elections, but that requires the necessary policy and legislation. And in the meantime, as I've said, these major problems with the SRD grant and increasing its value need to be addressed as a matter of urgency.
And also, and I think this is an important one, lots of conversation on what would be said by the president yesterday, if that is an outcome of that Lekgotla that you alluded to earlier on, and whether that would reflect a series of compromises which would be the manifestation of what we'd expect the government of national unity to be. Now, specifically with regard to the interest that your organization has, there's been that sense that because many of the parties are less committed to transformation, that may play out. That's the compromises the ANC arm of the GNU would have to accept. Did that come through at all for you?
Yeah, I think, any party that wants to take away this basic income from millions of South Africans is committing political suicide, to be honest. And I think that all the parties have in some way or another said that they want to improve and increase income support of some sort, even if they don't support a system of basic income. So I think you have that momentum amongst those parties, and my institute has, together with coalition partners, has put out a brief video clip, just a 1 to 2 minute clip, which quotes all the leaders paying lip service or committing to this improvement in income transfers to South Africans. So, we'll be watching them and holding them accountable. But I think that it was encouraging that the president has made the statement. He's now said a much more detailed program in terms of the medium-term strategic framework is going to be thrashed out by cabinet. So we're really looking forward to seeing those details and looking forward to the new minister, Talashe, outlining the DSD's program now to make this commitment a reality.
Okay, Neil, the last thing, which for you would be the first thing, what's the next thing you'd be looking out for now?
I think two things, really. The one is what I've just said, which is to see the announcement of a timetable of policy and legislation to make this a reality. But the second thing is to begin to address this massive exclusion of beneficiaries and to improve the value of the grant. The government has the capacity to introduce a supplementary budget since it's a new government, and we believe this is one of the urgent issues because too many people in South Africa are actually going hungry every night.
As
and
we
this is a
certainly know.
crisis which needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Well, that's where we're going to leave it. Appreciate you giving up your time, Neil Coleman from the Institute of Economic Justice. Well, there you are. I mean, that's maybe the first stake as we get into the business of the seventh administration. And Neil Coleman in particular, looking at the issues of grants, what's coming up, what may come, what may not happen, but some very specific details and timelines may be missing now, but it has to come up pretty soon. Let me pick out, before we get to the news headlines, which we will get, I can tell you now, let's pick out some comments because people are commenting on the issue of Palestine and Israel. Here's one.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. It's Brian Mabai from Protea Glen. I think it's time for Palestine and Israel to end the war between them because the ball is in their court. It's only them who can stop this war. It's only them who understand the ancient difference. It's like, Ashraf, if me and you are fighting, we bring more people to discuss our issues. We won't stop fighting, but we'll keep on doing something which is wrong. But if we admit and accept our problem and sit down and speak to each other and apologize whether one is wrong or right, then everything will be solved. But the world is making it too hard. Brandma by Protea Glen. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Brian. I mean, just a quick one on that one. I hear what you're saying in principle, but it is so much more complex than just two different groups fighting, right? For one, I mean, there's a sense, and I'm not saying it's my words, it comes from the ICJ in terms of their understanding of Israel being an occupier, and that'll come through in the news now. That's important. The second one, yesterday, the Israeli Knesset once again voted, and they voted against any potential or move for a two-state solution. So what I'm trying to say, it is so complex and simply saying, just sort it out, you guys. It can't be because the problem didn't start with just two guys. The problem started effectively on a far more global scale, starting with what happened with the Balfour Declaration long before that. But let's get the news headlines now. It's 4:30 with Madupi.
very much, Mr. Garda, and good afternoon. In your headlines, Sports, Arts and Culture Minister Gayton McKenzie says he would pay for the legal appeals for everyone that the impeached Judge John Hlophe ever sentenced to prison. The body of an unidentified female has been exhumed at the Tabong Pumlani Cemetery in Velkom, and Britain has announced that it is resuming funding for the biggest UN agency operating in Gaza. Details of these and other stories with Greg at 5.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N3 southbound in Alexandra has a crash reported after Marlborough Drive exit. In Midrand, the N1 northbound is slow moving towards Samrand Road, and the N1 southbound has a crash reported before Olifantsfontein Road. And the R21 Nelson Mandela Drive southbound in Pretoria is slow moving at Elephant Road. In KZN, the N2 northbound has a truck crash reported before Senkwazi. The N3 eastbound is queuing towards Spaghetti Junction. The N2 southbound is slow moving towards Spaghetti Junction. In Cape Town, on Saturday, the 20th of July, Huguenot Tunnel will be closed to all traffic from 6 a.m. until 4 p.m. for maintenance works. The N7 Jakes Havel Drive southbound is queuing towards Voortrekker Road. The N1 outbound is slow moving towards Okavango Road exit, and the M5 southbound slow moving towards Crombom Road. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Khapele.
Right to me, our own Minister of Sport. What's on the show today?
Hi, Ashraf, and a very good afternoon to our listeners. We start things off with football this afternoon. SuperSport United have announced the signing of Vincent Boele on a one-year contract with an option to renew the contract. The 32-year-old opted to leave Orlando Pirates with 2 years left on his contract, looking for first-team opportunities, and he's currently with Matsatsantsa in Botswana for their pre-season. In rugby, South Africa outscored Wales 7-5 to claim a 47-31 win in their 7th playoff at Cape Town Stadium. This is in the Under-20 championships. And in Olympics, Sports Minister Gayton McKenzie has vowed to do everything in his power to ensure that sprinter Luxolo Adams goes to the Olympics. If you remember, just earlier this week, I reported that Athletics South Africa had dropped the athlete from the team going to the Games because they believe he's not in good shape and not ready for the Olympics. And McKenzie says that according to him, if an athlete is good enough to qualify, they deserve to compete. He added that he expects medals from Team South Africa at the Paris Olympics. And still staying with the Olympics, South African long jump legend Kgotso Mokoena has been appointed the Athletes Education Ambassador for the World Anti-Doping Agency. As the chairperson of SASCOC Athletes Commission, Mokoena is eager to share his extensive knowledge with athletes from various countries at the Olympic Village when he departs for Paris. In motorsport, Carlos Sainz topped the times for Ferrari ahead of Max Verstappen in the opening practice at the Hungarian Grand Prix. The Spaniard clocked 1 minute to 18.713 seconds to beat Max Verstappen by 0.276 seconds, and Charles Leclerc was the third fastest. Also, in our Women in Sports feature, don't forget that you can still nominate your favorite woman in sport for the G Sports Awards. That's happening in August. It's a platform that celebrates women regardless if she's a broadcaster, administrator, or in PR, a supporter, or an athlete. As long as you feel that they deserve to be celebrated, just head over to the G Sport website and nominate your favorite. And joining me on the line just to chat a bit more about this, I am joined by the founder of G Sport. Also an honor to call her a mentor. It's Cass Naidu. I am disturbing her shopping time. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, Cass.
It's good to be on the show always. Thank you so much for plugging the nominations. We're getting such amazing new names that are coming up, and I think this year we're going to be quite surprised with the winners list. It's not the regular people that are nominated, and it's nice to see the messages getting out around the country.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the impact of the G Sports Awards in terms of the finalists, the winners, and also those that you afford the opportunity to work at the awards.
Yeah, I think one of the things we learned quite early on, as soon as Momentum came on board as a sponsor, is it was our obligation, responsibility, and we held ourselves quite accountable to say that when the money came in, we wanted to go directly into the pockets of women in sport. We had an excellent session yesterday, just an information sharing session. And the reality is there aren't many jobs going around in media. So people who have won previously the G4 Awards, who are finalists previously, they now get to work on the campaign and earn money from it. So the impact is far deeper than just winning an award. And also those that are winning awards are going on to get better jobs. So the impact on the stage, off the stage, and just upskilling the industry, to me, the more I travel, the more I realize when I come home, you have to share and grow together.
Absolutely. And we've seen that with you, how you're always willing to share your knowledge with everyone, especially women in the industry. Till when can people nominate?
Nominations are open until the 9th of August. We will announce finalists on the 22nd of August, and then it's crazy with the public voting until the 31st of August. And we've moved the awards out to September to ensure that the Paralympians get home and they're able to attend as well and not to leave them out. So we're super excited, can't wait, and absolutely love the fact that we get to do this for the 19th time.
Sure.
We turn 18 on the 1st of August. As I said, 18 and no excuses. But it's the 19th awards coming up, and it's one of the reasons I've just decided to take a bit of a breather from cricket commentary so I can focus properly on women's sport.
Sure, a full 19 years. And I mean, we've witnessed how it becomes bigger and greater every single year. But before I let you go, Cass, I mean, let's talk about the landscape of women in sports. We've been fighting for a place at the table, but is our voices heard?
I think sometimes we fight over one table instead of realizing that we just need to pull tables together. One of the challenges with pulling tables together is, are we doing this for an ego? Are we doing this because we really want to be sincere? I like what the Minister of Sport is saying about really prioritizing athletes, and I think we need to start really focusing in on how we're going about things, where we're going, what we're doing. For me, when I look at where we are at the moment, I think women's sport is heading in the right direction, but at the same time, there's just a long, long road to go. And every time we do well, we realize there's just, a bigger role for each of us to play.
Well, Cass, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to be the finalists and looking forward to those awards. As you did hear from Cass herself, they are moved out to September. It's not going to be in August anymore. It's going to be in September so that we can allow all our athletes who are going to the Olympics and Paralympics to be back and attend those awards as a whole. Cass, thank you very much. And with that said, it is a wrap from my side. I'll have more on other sports in the next hour.
The countdown to the Paris Olympics 2024 is just days away. Live the intense rivalries, inspiring comebacks, and record-breaking performances from a wide variety of sporting disciplines such as aquatics, athletics, gymnastics, boxing, breakdancing, and football. Experience the Olympic Games Paris 2024 from Friday 26 July until Sunday 11 August. Live on SABC Sport, the proud broadcaster of the Olympic Games Paris 2024.
For the love of the game.
S3 is bringing you the best in Indian cinema every Sunday at 2 p.m. Laugh, dance, get drawn into the drama, revved up with the action, and maybe, just maybe, shed a little tear. Catch Gargi on the 7th of July, Selfie on the 14th, Prince on the 21st, and Laila Majnu on the 28th. It's Indian cinema like you've never seen it before. Channel your best entertainment with Indian cinema only on S3. Open up.
It's Truck Month at Ford, and that means one thing. You save big when you upgrade to a 4x4. For a limited time only, get a Ford Ranger 4x4 from only $8,599 per month. Visit your nearest Ford dealer to get the best deal on a Ranger 4x4 from only $8,599 per month with free 4x4 driver training. TNCs apply.
Do you have fresh musical talent lighting up your timeline or making waves in your community?
Well, we want to see them shine, so send their details to our WhatsApp line on 063 408 8863 and they could perform live on Expresso.
Discover the hottest new artists and be part of the excitement.
Catch Expresso weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. only on S3 and be part of the magic.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Right, let's get to the markets now with Paswana Mpatlele. Paswane, good. Now we're going to connect with Paswane in just a moment or so. Let me tell you what else is coming up. Maybe before I do that, let me put this to you, right? How about you commenting on President Ramaphosa's address yesterday, but this is how you do it. Just give me one word to describe it. So if you're texting, that's probably even easier. Just one word, and you can do the same thing, obviously, if you're sending out a voice note. One word, even if you're calling in, and then I'll allow you another sentence to explain why you said the one word. So if your one word is like fabulous, then you get a sentence to explain why you say it's fabulous. Can you do that? It's a bit of fun, but I think it's very, very interesting. One word that describes for you President Ramaphosa's address at the opening of the 7th administration, right? So think about that. In the meantime, we have Paswane Mpatlela, the Senior Account Manager at Markway Fund Managers. Paswane, good chatting to you. Let's get, as always, local and global markets, right?
Right. Ashraf, good afternoon to everyone and all your listeners. You know, Ashraf, this week has been characterized by negative sentiment driven by geopolitical tension between U.S.-China, U.S. political uncertainty that has brought a lot of volatility in forex and equity markets. And today's development hasn't eased any matters as we saw global equities were in the red at the back of a global IT outage that took place that disrupted activities in a number of sectors such as airlines, banks, even including affecting some of our local companies. And in the wake of this development, investors are now making sense that as much as the AI advances are giving us benefits, the market is too concentrated. It raises risks such as one company event risk, such as updating their system, can have a ripple effect on the global economic activity. And when we add on to the volatility, we saw geopolitical front, we saw that a drone strike took place in Israel. That is increasing what is going into the weekend. Outside that, economic news, we saw Japan inflation was unchanged, seeing the yen muted, helping dollar pick up, while UK retail sales fell more than estimated. And when we just take all this together and look at the overall picture, US markets are in the red. We saw Dow was the biggest losses, down 0.7, S&P Nasdaq down 0.3, Europe FTSE was down 0.5, DAX CAC down 0.6, locally we're down 0.7, major losses coming out of resource sector down 2.2, industrial down 0.7, financials picking up slight gains of 0.1, and in the commodity sector we see gold is down 1.6%, but still keeping that 2,400 level, while platinum was down 0.2 at $967 an ounce. Oil just ticked up slightly by 0.1 at $84.66 a barrel. The rand was relatively weak against major currencies. The rand against the dollar is at 18.23, rand against the euro 19.90, and rand against the pound was 23.62.
Thanks for chatting, and we're going to talk on Monday. I'm sure of that, right? Paswane, thanks for your time. Right, okay. We're going to pick up some calls, and lots of people have different views, particularly on the ICJ advisory, but not just that. I'm very interested in what I'd say the one word to describe President Ramaphosa's speech yesterday. One word, and then a sentence that explains the one word. But start with the one word. Whatever it is that you choose, that's fine. In the meantime, not just your thoughts, but certainly the political parties have an opportunity to respond to yesterday's speech, and they're doing so. They've done so all morning. That continues, and then the president himself will respond to their responses next week, right? So here's some of the highlights, what we've heard from this morning. First of all, from the ANC's position, the ANC chief whip, which is Indumiseni Ntuli.
All our policies are based on creating a prosperous South Africa that truly belongs to all who live in it, united in their diversity. Madam Speaker, in the words of our beloved leader and President, Comrade Oliver Tambo, in which he said, and I quote, "Without unity, we are weak. Without action, we will remain oppressed. To move forward, we have to act in unity and unite in action," unquote. We truly have to act in unity and unite in action. The gains of our freedom and democracy must be defended, consolidated, and advanced to realize socio-economic rights as demanded by the Constitution of the Republic. We proceed from the understanding that our Constitution represents the genuine will of our people and their desire to build a better life for all, and therefore that as their democratically elected representatives, this is a task we can neither abdicate nor delegate. We need to continue to engage within our society, within and outside these chambers, to ensure that our society unites and strive to act in unity. consistent with the call that was made by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday, that our country must converge in a national dialogue. The ANC remains by far the largest party and has pulled together other parties to ensure that we continue the journey started in 1912.
Okay, so that's the ANC view. Then what about the MK party? Here's Dr. John Hlophe, the MK party's parliamentary leader.
I rise here on behalf of Umkhonto weSizwe, the party which I lead in Parliament, to respond to the speech that was made by the President last night. Our position is as follows. The establishment of the Government of National Unity is singularly a very cruel joke by the Ramaphosa faction of the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, perpetuated against the oppressed and downtrodden masses of our people. Our people are painfully aware that it would be impossible to create a united nation in South Africa unless the legacy of colonialism and apartheid was addressed. For a very long time, South Africans have been constituted by two nations, one black, poor and economically disempowered and excluded, and the other white, rich, and in command of most of the means of production, material and incorporeal resources and advantages of our society. These are not my words. These are the words of the former President, Thabo Mbeki. He uttered these words many years ago, and nothing has changed.
Okay, that's from the MK party position. What about the DA? Here's their leader, John Steenhuisen.
You see, time and time again, they've used populist politics and racial rhetoric to break down any attempt at building a consensus over the growth-enhancing reforms that our economy so desperately needs. They have done so deliberately because it is only by sowing division and preventing reform that they can keep institutions weak, keep the taps of corruption flowing, and stay out of jail for their many misdeeds. For far too long, we've allowed those who seek to break our country down for their own personal benefit and gain to hold back the builders who yearn for a South Africa with a growing economy that creates millions of new jobs. 2024 election, where the people of South Africa chose a new path by not giving any party a majority and forcing us to create a multi-party government, offers us the most important opportunity and the most powerful opportunity in recent history to overcome the suffocating grip that the breakers have held on our economy and society. The Government of National Unity is South Africa's chance to free itself from populism, division, and economic decline.
Right, and that's from the DA side. Now, finally, from the EFF, their Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema.
We want to salute the people of South Africa who have rejected the former liberation movement that has enjoyed political power for the last 30 years. Today, that era has come to an end. It is beyond doubt that the former liberation movement failed to turn the political power into economic power. As our forefathers in the liberation struggle in the African continent said, political power without economic power is meaningless. Mr. President, you indeed spoke like a badly wounded buffalo yesterday. You spoke like a given-up soul. Nothing inspirational came from that tired speech yesterday. You didn't speak like a person who declined electoral support with 17% to less than 50%. How on earth do you repeat a SONA speech that made you lose elections? You were saying to South Africans yesterday, in no so many ways, that you learned nothing out of these historic elections to an extent that you want to continue business as usual.
Okay, so that's 4 opinions from 4 party leaders. And of course, that continues today, and there'll be reaction next week as well. So looking forward to that. But you, and I've asked you to give your comments, just one word is all I said, just one word for you that best describes President Ramaphosa's speech. And then on top of that, if you'd like, then you can just give a sentence, not longer, no paragraphs, a sentence to describe why to tell us why you've used that word. So the one person says it was meaningful. I thought there was weight behind the words. And then let's wait and see. Another one, inertia. The president's address feels like he makes multiple promises. And there's a couple more. Well, one says, deja vu. We heard that before many times, in fact. Okay, further thoughts we'll get. By the way, we need to pick up the conversation with regard to safety and security in the KZN region. We'll do that after this.
Chomi, I just hope I get auto-assess this year so I can just accept.
You're so lazy. Remember, not everyone gets the auto-assessment notice.
I know, but I'm ready. I've got my e-filing password sorted, I've updated my details, and my IRP5 is ready.
Make tax matters priority by updating your personal and banking details and expect your auto-assessment notice from 1 to 14 July. If you disagree with your auto-assessment, file your return via e-filing. If you don't receive a notice, visit e-filing to submit your tax return from 15 July 2024. Visit sars.gov.za for more information. Your tax matters. SARS, at your service.
X at SFM Radio and at Ashraf Garda.
Okay, you may be aware, certainly yesterday, of news of the shooting of a high-profile member of the SARS legal team in terms of their investigations, right? That happened in KZN. That person, I understand, is still in hospital and quite critical of that. I'm talking about Advocate Koroth Nodier, right? So we certainly wish her the best in terms of a very speedy recovery, and I pray that will be the case. So let's talk about that, and then the greater issue around just general policing in the province, right? So earlier today, the KZN Police Commissioner in Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi gave an update on the state of policing overall in the province, together with issues of crime analysis, arrests, and many other issues, right? And of course, the issue of the person I've just mentioned earlier from SARS. So we have on the line then the KZN Police Commissioner. Good chatting to you, and thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you. So you had this press briefing today. Give us some of the key findings. Maybe let's start with the very topical issue, the one that I've just mentioned, of Advocate Koroth Nodier. What can you tell us about that? First of all, in terms of her position, in terms of her health, and then in terms of what you may know about what happened.
Well, it was an unfortunate incident that happened in our province and in the upmarket area of Umhlanga. We are told that as the advocate was making the way back to the hotel, he came under gunfire from a person who was in a vehicle. It looks like a drive-by shooting. And since then, fortunately, the advocate was not survived that attack and was admitted in hospital. So we've of course launched an investigation on that, but we prioritized that case by taking it from the police station and we allocated to the Hawks so that we can have a thorough investigation on the circumstances surrounding that attack.
Okay, and maybe because we're talking about that, all the more your planned briefing, I think, in advance is even more important. Talk to me about what's come through in terms of what you've shared with the public today.
No, we're just updating the public that as many times the media or journalists always meet with us on the street when we are fighting crime, on crime scenes, when there are incidents that has happened. We felt that it's important for us just to have a sit down with the media and engage with them and just show them the state of policing in the province. It's been mandated by the Constitution of the Republic, Section 205, Subsection 3 of the Constitution, that give us a mandate of what we're supposed to do. So we were just reflecting on that, indicating the number of people that we're able to arrest and charge, which were over 30,000 of them since the beginning of the financial year to date. Not necessarily that all of them are in custody. There's quite a substantial number of them that are still in custody within the police as well as correctional services that are undergoing court cases. And a number of firearms have been recovered in the province, a number of drugs that have been recovered in the province. So we're sharing those numbers. And high-profile cases involve political task team work, a number of criminals that have been arrested as a result of shooting and killing of the councillors and different municipality officials, and as well as traditional leadership that continue to be under threat in our province. So that's really what the briefing was all about.
Okay. And in terms of, operations, I know it's early days, but did something come through? Did you share in terms of maybe some, innovations, new ways of tackling and dealing with crime?
We really sometimes don't want to share our techniques. There are things that are known that have been spoken about at times that we do. Of recently, what we are busy with the project in the famous Inanda Township and the surroundings, where we are putting out CCTV cameras. It's a big project that we are initiating as a police, and it's the first time that police will put out CCTV cameras on their own, so they can be able to monitor the entire policing area to help us to respond quickly. So it's costing a lot of money. We've employed drones. We've recently graduated a group of drone pilots at Virginia Airport that are undergoing the training. So they're qualified pilot trainer, drone pilots, and they're helping us to get our information that we want and following suspects and do surveillance as well.
And just finally, I think for most people living wherever they are in the country, but certainly in your region in KZN, the issue is always, if there's a problem, can we depend on the police to provide the type of safety and security we require if there's a problem? And then the more important one is, what are the steps being put in place to ensure that the problem doesn't exist in the first place, to be preventative? Now, I'm hearing what you're saying. You're not going to give us all the details, but here's the important one. Are you confident that you can tackle the crime issues in your province?
Well, it depends what type of crime. There are crimes that are happening behind closed doors that are involving families, such as, for instance, sexual offenses tend to affect a lot of people that know each other. But by and large, we will urge society to really help us to fight some of the crimes. A typical example, for any liquor establishment to be authorized by liquor board, community must give their opinion whether they agree for that liquor establishment to exist. And if communities take it to the street and really protest against a license of the liquor establishment, then surely the liquor board is going to remove that, or they won't issue it. So if they don't issue it, if the community really protests and they don't issue that liquor license, that will be the prevention of a lot of things, because then you don't have a place where people can go and get intoxicated, which result into other crimes that we saw a lot of these crimes that are happening in and around the liquor establishment. So that needs community to really get involved, because they do get consulted.
And I mean, just lastly, in terms of social media coverage, I see lots of comments about, KZN police shootings and many suspected suspects. Anything you'd like to tell us about that?
Look, we are faced with very aggressive criminals that do not want to be taken to custody, and which then leads into the shootouts. And we don't appreciate that much as a police, although it's something we have to do, but we don't necessarily celebrate it, simply because for every police officer getting involved in a shooting, then we must follow with the counseling process in order to prevent any psychological illnesses that might affect that police officer. So it's not something we celebrate that we want to do as a police. We would like to arrest a person and send the person to prison through court process. So that's what we'll want to do. But unfortunately, there's been a lot of shooting incidents. We can't run away from it. It's our job to protect the citizens. Okay, got that.
Mhlanhla Mkonazi, the KZN Police Commissioner, thank you for giving off your time, right? Before we get to news, lots of people commenting about the speech from Ramaphosa. Here's one before that.
Ashraf Willie Nkrumah Ramaphosa's statement yesterday was fair. Thank you.
It was fair. Here's another.
Afternoon, Mr. Ashraf. The one word for me to describe the speech of the president, it's a disaster. Disaster because how can you always repeat the same thing, talking about crime, poverty, unemployment, while there's no different? It's a disaster for me. Thank you.
I wonder if it's a disaster, what did you expect? What would you have expected from him to say? Just think about that. Let's get the news now. It's 5 o'clock. Here's Greg House.
Thank you, Ashraf. In this news update, Mackenzie hits back at Klophe law comments and Britain to resume funding UN agency in Gaza. Good day to you. The Sports, Arts and Culture Minister, Gayton Mackenzie, says he would pay for legal appeals for everyone that the impeached judge, John Klophe, ever sentenced to prison. This after Klophe, now the leader of the MK party in Parliament, said during the debate on President Cyril Ramaphosa's opening of Parliament address that Roman Dutch law should be scrapped. But Mackenzie reminded him that he used to preside in court using the exact same laws to adjudicate matters.
While you were getting the perks of the judge being a judge, you never saw something wrong with Roman Dutch law. Today, when you're no longer there, now you are seeing something wrong with Roman Dutch law. It cannot be. I'm going to pay for an appeal for everybody that has been sentenced by you, because you sentenced them with the wrong law according to you.
The EFF leader Julius Malema says all plans and interventions announced by President Ramaphosa last night are meaningless. He was responding to his opening of Parliament address. Cyril Ramaphosa addressed a joint sitting of Parliament at the Cape Town City Hall last night. Among others, he announced that the government of national unity would concentrate on inclusive growth and job creation, reducing poverty and the high cost of living, and thirdly, to build a capable, ethical and developmental state. But Malema says all of it are old promises that'll never be realised.
All the things you said yesterday are meaningless because they are exactly what you said in the 6 State of the Nation addresses you have given since you became president in 2018. None of the commitments you made during this State of the Nation addresses have been met. You state here that the vision you are operating under is still the National Development Plan Vision 2030, whose targets have never been met and will never be met.
The Secretariat Officer at Teachers Union SATU, Kulani Fakude, says he hopes that the Basic Education Minister, Siphiwe Gahube, got a clear message from the President's address that no minister is representing their party manifesto. This after Gahube showed discontent with the Bella Bill being signed into law. The bill seeks to strengthen governance in schools by tightening certain sections which have created challenges for the sector. The DA has been opposing the bill. SATU's affiliate COSATU has called on the President to sign the bill as a matter of urgency. Fakude elaborates.
The Bella Bill has gone through no less than 10 years of intensive and extensive consultation. It has gone to the National Assembly, it has gone to the National Council of Provinces, it has gone to the Select Committee, it has gone through public participation, it has gone through all those processes. And by the way, the DA was participating in those very same processes. What happened eventually is that in the National Council of Provinces, you had 8 provinces overwhelmingly voting in support of the Bella Bill. And the DA therefore cannot come now and say through the minister that they've deployed and say that the Bella Bill could even be unconstitutional and so forth.
The body of an unidentified female has been exhumed at the Tabong Pumlani Cemetery in Welkom in the Free State. This follows a search for the missing 30-year-old Portia Masupa, who was reported missing by her family. Police say a man has been taken in for questioning in order to see if he can assist in the case. The identity of the dead body is yet to be confirmed. Limpopo's Education Department says it will institute disciplinary actions against a teacher arrested for allegedly dealing in drugs. A male teacher employed at a school at Khamashashane was nabbed for alleged possession of drugs and an unlicensed firearm and ammunition in Polokwane. Police say they also seized drugs estimated at a street value of over 20,000 rand. Department spokesperson Mosimjani Khave.
The department has noted with disappointment the news of the arrest of a teacher for allegedly dealing in drugs. More that the scourge of drug abuse has been ravaging communities, especially the school-going youth who should be under the teacher's care and protection. Although as a department we cannot comment on the merit of the case as the matter is sub judice, the disciplinary procedures will be instituted as soon as the teacher reports for duty.
Britain's announced it's resuming funding for the biggest United Nations agency operating in Gaza. The British government said it would release $27 million to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees to ensure that support reached civilians on the ground. The new British Foreign Secretary David Lammy told Parliament that getting aid into Gaza was a moral necessity.
We are reassured that after Catherine Colonna's independent review, UNRWA is ensuring they meet the highest standards of neutrality and strengthening its procedures, including on vetting. UNRWA has acted. Partners like Japan, the European Union and Norway have also now acted. This government will act too. I can confirm to the House that we are overturning the suspension of UNRWA funding.
Top story, the Sports, Arts and Culture Minister Gayton McKenzie said he would pay for legal appeals for everyone that the impeached Judge John Klope ever sentenced to prison. That's SAFM News. I'm Greg Gous.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N3 southbound in Alexandra has a crash before London Road. All lanes are open. The N1 southbound in Sunninghill has a crash near Rivonia Road. The M1 southbound is slow moving through Crown interchange towards Boysons, and the N1 northbound in Midrand is slow moving towards Samrand Road. In KZN, the N2 northbound has a truck crash just before Zingwazi. The N2 southbound has a truck crash after the M41 gateway exit, and the N3 eastbound is queuing at Ashburton. In Cape Town, Valhalla Drive southbound is slow moving through Epping. Main Road southbound in Lakeside is queuing towards Boys Drive, and Kuburg Road northbound in Tableview is slow moving towards Blaauberg Road. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
The countdown to the Paris Olympics 2024 is just days away. Live the intense rivalries, inspiring comebacks, and record-breaking performances from a wide variety of sporting disciplines such as aquatics, athletics, gymnastics, boxing, breakdancing, and football. Experience the Olympic Games Paris 2024 from Friday 26 July until Sunday 11 August. Live on SABC Sport, the proud broadcaster of the Olympic Games Paris 2024.
For the love of the game.
It's Truck Month at Ford, and that means one thing. You save big when you upgrade to a 4x4. For a limited time only, get a Ford Ranger 4x4 from only $8,599 per month. Visit your nearest Ford dealer to get the best deal on a Ranger 4x4 from only $8,599 per month with free 4x4 driver training. T&Cs apply.
Chomi, I just hope I get auto assist this year so I can just accept.
You're so lazy. Remember, not everyone gets the auto assessment notice.
I know, but I'm ready. I've got my e-filing password sorted, I've updated my details, and my IRP5 is ready.
Make tax matters priority by updating your personal and banking details and expect your auto assessment notice from 1 to 14 July. If you disagree with your auto assessment, file your return via e-filing. If you don't receive a notice, visit e-filing to submit your tax return from 15 July 2024. Visit sars.gov.za for more information. Your tax matters. SARS, at your service.
Hey, want to check your TV license balance conveniently? Look no further. Our SMS service allows you to do just that. By sending a message containing your ID or TV license number to 44210, you can quickly access your balance without needing multiple inquiries or waiting on hold. Plus, standard SMS rates apply. Take advantage of this efficient method to stay informed and streamline your payment process today. T's and C's apply.
So July is Film Month. We know that the KwaZulu-Natal Tourism and Film Authority welcomes filmmakers from all over the world who are attending the festivities. And the lineup is fascinating. The Durban International Film Festival, the Durban Film Mart, and the ICP2 program. The Simon Sabela KZN Films and Television Awards itself on the 20th of July, which is tomorrow, isn't it? So we look forward to hosting you. That's the KZN province, hosting people in a beautiful province and doing tourism as well as film business. You can join the conversation, and these are the hashtags SSA24, and the second one, hashtag Beyond Imagination, and the third hashtag KZN has it all.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Do keep those comments coming. I asked you a question, said, give me one word, not a sentence, one word to describe President Ramaphosa's speech last night. Then after the one word, you can give me one sentence to explain the one word. You got that? Quite simple. Best way to do that is to WhatsApp us, 0614 104 107. You can also tweet it out. So just tag us on the Twitter, tag SFM Radio, on the X platform. You can also tag me, Ashraf Garda. Right, we're chatting to Pali Lahotla pretty shortly. But in the meantime, Picking up from yesterday's address by President Ramaphosa, Amnesty International has a position on this. They believe that the new administration must demonstrate its ability to provide basic services and uphold human rights for all residents of this country. This, as they argue, that service delivery in the country has been severely compromised by corruption and poor policy implementation. And, of course, there's more than that as well. Right. So with me is Genevieve Quintal, who's the spokesperson for Amnesty International South Africa. Genevieve, good chatting to you on the National Pulse. Hi.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure. I see there's a specific emphasis on service delivery, right? Tell me why.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Ashraf, if we look at service delivery, it's very much linked to basic human rights. Water, health, safety and security, climate, all these, the maintenance of infrastructure that ensures that people have access to water, safe sanitation, education, all of these things that fall under service delivery are basic human rights. And we're saying that, we need implementation. We hear year after year promises of improvements, promises of a better life for people, and every year people living in this country are disappointed. And so this is why we are focusing on service delivery, because there is that focus that's linked to human rights. And we're saying that no longer can we just accept these speeches and we all sit and talk about it after the speech, but then nothing happens and there's no accountability for why nothing is happening.
How do you measure the impact of poor service delivery to the lives of most South Africans?
Well, I think it's just, basically, Ashraf, looking at even just looking at the stats. I mean, if we look at water, and I think I've spoken about this before, there's something like 3 million people still don't have access to running water, and 5.3 million households don't have access to safe and reliable drinking water. Those are big numbers, and we're seeing it in the way that water is being lost in leaks. We're seeing it in the reports on corruption. We're seeing it in, there's so much evidence about this around us. And it's all based on this. Everything we're looking at is based on stats, based on facts, based on research, etc. And those are the things we're keeping an eye on. And that's what shows us whether there's an improvement or not.
Interesting. Your executive director, Shanila Mohammed, and I'm quoting her saying, with this new government, we expect to see results. Why would you expect to see results with this new government?
Well, Ashraf, we should be expecting with every government, right? We've been called in the sixth administration. We've done numerous, and I think we've spoken a few times, where we're demanding that those in position of power, those who are supposed to be delivering these services to the people living in South Africa, are expected. They are here serving the people. So it's not a new call. It's not that this government is any different to the last, but it is a new administration. It is probably different to the last. We are looking at a government of what they call a government of national unity. And we're saying, like we said to the previous government, we don't want to hear talk, we want to see action. And we'll hold them accountable to that. So it's the same call. It will keep pushing until we see real action, until we see real accountability for those who don't provide those services. Because I think that's the other issue, Ashraf, that people who are in these positions of power, who are supposed to be providing these services or helping in terms of, I know there's a whole system of government providing these services, aren't doing their job. And what's their accountability? What happens to those people? Nothing. They continue. So we're saying we want accountability. If things aren't happening, tell us why and what happens then. What's the mechanism in place? It's the accountability mechanism if someone doesn't do their job, if services aren't provided to the people of South Africa, if people's basic human rights aren't realized.
Okay, just the last thing. You touched on it slightly before, but just how damning has corruption been in, again, impacting the very fabric of South African life?
I think it's been very damning, Ashraf. And it's really, if you see it, it seeps into probably every facet of life in South Africa. If we look at, and taking it back to issues of human rights and services. I mean, look at the water department. It has been ransacked. And I know that a lot is they're trying to cut a electricity. Look at the health system. We've seen how how many whistleblowers come out and speak out. And even though there's been best efforts to silence and to, at some stage, very sadly, has been able to get rid of people, but these whistleblowers, we are seeing it in every facet, and really that needs to be cleared out. Corruption cannot be the excuse for why people aren't getting services.
Okay,
in this
and that's why
country.
you, as in Amnesty International South Africa, do what you do. So I appreciate your time there, Genevieve Quintal, spokesperson for Amnesty International South Africa. We chat to Pali Lehotla after this.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
By the way, here's a question I should be asking you, right? Are you a victim, if I can call it that, of this global cyber outage? I know my wife tried to pay for something today, tried 5 times, and said, there's something wrong with my card. There's just nothing's working here. Do you know what's going on here? And I said, okay, I think I know. Have you been in that position? If that's the case, let me know about it. You can WhatsApp 0614 104 107. You can also tweet it out. Otherwise, probably that's the best way. Just text it or tweet it out on our social media platforms, right? In the meantime, as we get further reaction on what's happened with regard to the President's address and what more, let's chat to Pali Lehotla, the former Statistician General and Head of Stats SA. Pali, good chatting to you as always. Hi.
Ashraf, how are you?
All right, very good. So I've been asking other people to use one word to describe the President's address. I should ask you the same thing. Just one word.
Well, Ashraf, this is a very difficult thing when you try to resist the President's speech to just one word. But I didn't listen to the speech. I read the speech. And I felt very depressed. So you want one word?
Well, if you can give us a word, that'd be great. But then we can talk about other things too, yeah.
If I felt depressed, it means the speech to me was depressing. So one word will be depressing.
So, okay, why depressing? Explain.
And why it was depressing? Because I was looking for what are the words that can actually direct us towards action. And what are the programs? And then I found that continuing was 11 times referred to. And all these things that are being continued are not things that have shown results. So when you continue on things that haven't shown results, then you haven't learned a lot from the things that we have been doing. The two continues which are very, very troubling is the one on the workers' rights as well as BEE. Those two, we know that the ruling party and the BA come at opposing ends to that. The second is prices, continuing on the prices to try and lower the cost on families. But we haven't hardly addressed the question of transport, which is really the distances that people have to travel to places of work. That issue of human settlements as places of residence, work, and play, we have not resolved that. And more importantly is that the institutions that deal with administered prices, and administered prices are prices that are governed by government in order to lower barriers to society to enjoy them, barriers to business to enjoy those prices, like bail actually ensure that the price of electricity is very low when it's established ESCOM. We've seen a lot of destruction of value. Now, when we use continue in those kinds of circumstances, does it mean we continue doing this? Gender-based violence. There are multiple drivers to gender-based violence. And the policy has not interrogated those multiple drivers to the scale of. So you find that in the speech, there's hardly any understanding of what the nature of the issues are. Then, of course, we find that naturally we prefer the revalidation scenario. Now, the revalidation scenario requires a whole set of policies that are different. In fact, I have to step back and say, in the scenarios we produced in Islam native, we produced the Gwara scenario, the Naida Walk, and Isibutwa. Basically, government has been in the Gwara scenario, and the set of policies that made them get to the Gwara scenario are the policies that they have at the moment on the table that they say they will continue to have.
Okay.
So unless you deal the macroeconomic. So when you bring all these things together, then you'll find that the challenges are so massive. And the interrogation and the prognosis that is being delivered is so underwhelming.
Okay. So I tell you what, just put that on pause because I want to then ask you the way forward in terms of how do you see the 7th administration getting about doing its work. More from Pali Lehotla in a moment.
Here he comes. Hello, guys. You're so dramatic. Hey, Bo, it's not me. It's the extra styling kit. The leather seats with the red finish. It's the tow bar, all coming standard with my red Isuzu badge. Wow, now that is extra.
Why be standard when you can get the all-new Isuzu D-Max X Rider from just 8,742 Rand. Prime less 3.5%, 0% deposit, 40% balloon, and 72 months to pay. Get yours today. Finance is subject to approval. Isuzu Finance, a product of West Bank, a division of First Rand Bank Limited, an authorized financial services and registered credit provider.
Attention ladies, join us on Saturday, August 17th, 2024 for the Star Choice is Yours Women's Day event at Altitude Fourways, a day dedicated to empowerment, inspiration and transformation. Engage with dynamic speakers, attend interactive conversations and connect with amazing women just like you. The event will be hosted by the fabulous Unatingai. Don't miss out on this opportunity to celebrate and elevate yourself. Get your tickets now at www.quicket.co.za for 550 Rand, drinks, food and a gift bag included. Plus, stand a chance to win an honor product. This incredible event is powered by independent media and the Honor 200 series.
Shopping sprees. Catching flights while others catch feelings. Shaking that thing while sipping on some bubbles on a yacht in Dubai. Some call it living soft. You know, Njofo. Tune into Sugar Baby Dating, a highly revealing documentary that lifts the lid of the sugar baby dating phenomenon and talks to girls who have a string of rich older men funding their lifestyles and the women that feel damaged by the whole experience. This Thursday at 10 p.m. Is it just a little frivolous fun, or is there a sinister side to sugar baby dating? Channel your inner curiosity with Sugar Baby Dating, 11 July at 10 p.m. only on S3. Open up. S3.
X at SFM Radio and at Ashraf Garda.
Right, Pali Lehotla with us. Pali, you've got time for 1 minute to answer one important question, okay? So, in the light of all the things you've said, going forward, therefore, and the big challenge then for the government of national unity or this multi-party democracy in meeting some of the biggest challenges of the people of South Africa, what would that be?
I think that what we should be doing is to go and look at the Naida Walk scenario that we prepared in Islam meeting in 2018. It does say what the policy measures should be and what the policy coordination should be. And it says future-proof because it's based on econometric modeling. It shows the science and it looks at all scenarios. Even before we go into what the nation, the Uyghur nation would be, the quantified scenario of 2018 do provide a platform against which the deliberations of where the outcomes should be are set. Anything else outside that surely is not foresight-based, not systemic design-based, is not, it doesn't have future-proof.
Mm-hmm.
At least when I say future-proof, I'm not saying ironclad, but I'm saying a framework for discussion. And the other thing that I think we should be doing is to go and look at what business proposed in 2020, agree on the targets that business had put on the table, and then use the implemented scenario, Naida Walk, as the framework for moving towards an agreement.
Okay.
In the meantime, while we are trying to look at what the Weaver Nation might look
And
like.
that's where we're going to leave it. Pauline Hotla, appreciate your time. There we are. Important insights. We'll have a podcast up of that conversation as well shortly, together with the one from Amnesty International South Africa too. Let's talk about the global cyber outage after this.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
Well, I certainly know my wife saying, hey, you know what? My card didn't go through, it didn't work. I see Roshni SMSing or WhatsApping saying, hi, my card said declined. I had money in the card. Thank you. Well, we've heard that story. And that's why people couldn't even take flights around the world. I mean, it's been a massive issue. So what's the big deal here? Richard Frost is with me, cybersecurity expert from Amata. Richard, good chatting to you. Hello.
Good evening, Ashraf.
Thank you. So give us some context. I'm suggesting there was some cyber outage and it's affected some people, and I'm thinking everybody knows about it, but perhaps they don't know. So just give us some background in terms of what's actually happened.
Yeah, Ashraf. So we picked up that there's been an outage created by one of the endpoint protection software vendors. As you know, with ransomware and malware, the fight against the malware has become more sophisticated, and so has the endpoint protection game. One of the vendors, which is actually quite a big leader in that endpoint security space, they released an update to their software to assist with this protection. And unfortunately, there was a line of code that wasn't well documented, and it caused an outage to any system that was utilizing the software. I believe that the outage started in Australia, and I suspect that the guys obviously uploaded the update, the follow the sun method from Australia going around through parts of South Africa. And as the updates were released and inserted, so it brought down the systems that were running the software.
Okay, so normally if we spoke about this, it would just be some cyber outage or maybe a cyber crime story that people listen to academically. The reality is now it affects people's lives, even in our country, in South Africa. Give me an idea, if what you know anecdotally, how it's affected people in terms of how they go about what is the seemingly normal day in their normal lives.
Yeah, I think the software in question is not something that a consumer would utilize or a very small business. It is a very big enterprise solution. So effectively what you have found is because it is a world-leading provider of endpoint security, the large entities like banks, the healthcare industry, all of those are utilizing the software to protect the endpoint. The way the endpoint protection software works is it attaches through to the Windows processors on the servers and on the desktops. And this has now created what's known as a kernel panic, to be very technical, which causes the Windows system to kind of go into a panic state, and then it reboots and brings up that blue screen of death, as it's commonly known in the IT field, right? So you see that blue message pop up saying, the server needs to shut down or the PC needs to shut down. So the impact now is if you're running this in a bank or if you're running this in any form of business, obviously the systems that are working on top of those servers would obviously go offline as well. So your banks, if they're running it, you wouldn't be able to, do internet banking transactions. You wouldn't be able to do certain card payment transactions.
I mean, I see airlines were also cancelled for various reasons, whether it's not just the boarding passes, I think just security in terms of the airline's data. So there were a whole lot of issues that's been affected. I understand Microsoft now saying the issue has been fixed. Has it been fixed?
It has. So obviously the software vendor in question has released an update. They've also sent through a temporary fix. In other words, if you run the computer in the safe mode and you remove a specific line out of the configuration, it will fix the issue temporarily. And there's a longer-term fix that's obviously being implemented now. So the issue has been resolved. But, I mean, this is not something that's very uncommon either. I mean, if you look at 2021, I think there was a company called Fastly. They rolled out an update on their network, and it brought the whole network down, which actually then impacted most of Google's network and a few other large enterprises.
And maybe lastly, what's the big lesson to learn from this?
Very difficult to state this without, causing problems, but you would probably want to make sure that your software updates are tested more rigorously before they go out to the public, just to make sure that they don't, create some kind of an issue. A lot of software vendors do release bugs, unfortunately, and this is the reason why we have to do these updates, right? But if the bug itself that's written into the software causes an outage, that's when it becomes problematic.
Okay, that's where we can leave it. Richard Frost, cybersecurity expert from Amata. But there you are. Have you been affected? You can still comment. Maybe I won't take your calls, but just quick WhatsApp voice notes or text. Have you been affected by this global cyber outage, and in what way? Have you had your flights grounded? Not in South Africa, I doubt it very much, but it's hit flights, banks, telecoms, media, payments made online using your cards. It's affected your life. The only thing you could do is probably listen here to the National Pulse on SAFM. I don't know. Let's get the news headlines. It's 5:30. Here's Greg House.
Quick look at those headlines. The Sports, Arts and Culture Minister Gate McKenzie said he would pay for legal appeals for everyone that the impeached Judge John Klopper ever sentenced to prison. The City of Tshwane's Jackie A says the Metro has made significant progress in improving its finances, and the UN's top court says Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories is against international law. A full update on that story and other news at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N1 southbound in Sunninghill has a crash near Rivonia Road. The N1 northbound in Midrand is slow moving towards Samrand Road. In Pretoria, the R21 Nelson Mandela Drive southbound is slow moving at Elephant Road. Eskom Pahleli Drive northbound has delays towards Moot Street, and Dulmus Road southbound is slow moving towards Piring Road. In KZN, the N2 northbound has a truck crash before Zinkwazi. The N2 southbound is queuing through Spaghetti Junction. The N2 northbound has a stationary truck before the M41 Gateway exit. The N2 southbound has a crash after the M41 Gateway exit, and the N3 eastbound has a stationary truck at Ashburton. In Cape Town, the M5 southbound is slow moving towards Artery Road. The N2 eastbound is slow moving towards Bunga Avenue. Marine Drive northbound is slow moving towards Racecourse Road, and the N7 checks Hadwell Drive southbound slow moving towards Voortrekker Road. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Duming Khapele.
Right, what are we talking about? It's a big sporting weekend.
It's a big sporting weekend, one being rugby, and Salman Murat says that it's a massive privilege for him and his family to be named Springbok captain for tomorrow's game against Portugal in the closing test of the Castle Lager incoming series in Bloemfontein. Having led the SA schools and junior Springbok teams as well as the DHL Stormers and DHL Western Province, Murat is one of the main contenders to take over the captain's armband from Kolisi, and he also says that he's also grateful that he's able to lean on Kolisi for advice. That match kicks off at 5 p.m. and it'll be interesting to see how they will do down there in Bloemfontein. In cricket, Paul Royals have announced the signing of England batter Joe Root ahead of the third season of the SA20 that will kick off in January 2025. The former England captain has amassed a mammoth 19,219 international runs across all three formats. Root has played 105 T20 so far in his career, scoring 2,432 runs, and also known to chip in with the ball, having picked up 27 wickets at an economy of 8.47. In football, SuperSport United have announced the signing of Vincent Boule on a one-year contract with an option to renew. The 32-year-old opted to leave Orlando Pirates with 2 years left on his contract, looking for first-team opportunities. He is currently with Matsatsantsa in Botswana for their pre-season. Then, following his brief stint as an interim coach for Kaizer Chiefs last season, Kevin Johnson insists that he gave the Glamour Boys his all. The 65-year-old initially arrived at the club to take up the role of head of youth before abruptly being thrust to the senior team when Molefi Ntseki was fired after just 114 days in charge of the Soweto Giants. Now, Johnson has been heavily criticized after Chiefs finished 10th in the DStv Premiership, but the ex-Amazulu mentor says it wasn't for a lack of trying.
As a team, as players, we didn't take the responsibility to win the games when we were on the pitch. I can tell you I gave my 150% to make sure that every training session was run according to the objective we needed over the weekend, or the objective we did not receive over the past weekend. We really gave, and I have to give all the technical people the credit for that. We gave our 150%, knowing what the timelines were on the pitch.
Well, in an interesting one, Barcelona fans have been contributing symbolic amounts of money to the club's official TikTok account, all in an effort to support the La Liga side to secure the signing of forward Nico Williams. The 22-year-old became a major transfer target for top European clubs as he was one of the most exciting players in Spain's 7-match winning run at the European Championship. Williams showed a promising partnership with Barca forward Lamine Yamal, who was named the tournament's best young player. So the fans now are eagerly pushing for Barcelona to sign him so that there's a Yamal and Williams attacking duo as they send the funds to the Catalan club, which has faced financial challenges in recent times. Then in motorsport, Carlos Sainz topped the times for Ferrari ahead of Max Verstappen in the opening practice at the Hungarian Grand Prix. The Spaniard clocked 1 minute 18.713 seconds to beat Verstappen by 0.276 seconds. Charles Leclerc was third fastest. On that note, it's a wrap from my side. I'll have more on Monday.
Let me tell you before we end, not so much a question, just a comment. So I attended the launch of the newly established venue, building of Stars of Africa, headed by Farouk Khan, right?
Yeah.
So impressive. Really, what an impressive place. Here in Melville, it's not far away from where we are right now. But I mean, the point that came through is I think as a private academy, they produced about 10 players who've played for the country. And that's huge.
Absolutely.
That is huge, right? So that's one. But so well received. I mean, I'm trying to think, Dr. Komala was there, Pizzo Massimani was there, Desiree Ellis was there, Fani Madida was there, Mike Ntombela was there, probably going to miss a few other people, Fran Hilton Smith was there. But all of them incredibly complimentary about the role of the Stars of Africa, and they've played in developing top-notch South African talent as a private institution, and suggesting there needs to be greater collaboration with the Minister of Sport and with schools. And I think Pizza's doing something similar, that they have to collaborate more, because ultimately, why are South Africa not competing amongst the very best in the world?
I actually wanted to say that in terms of collaborating, it's great to see some of the legends, football legends, or those that were big back in the days, doing their all to make sure that they plunge into grassroots football. Like, for example, you mentioning that Pizzo also has a program, and them just coming together and supporting each other. It just shows that they all, hand in hand, are trying to get our football status in the country to the next level.
And they all want they want it to the best. Well, I wanted champion level, bottom line to it. Okay, you have a great weekend. You want to give us your sign off?
Alrighty, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
That's the God bless, so that you know that. Yeah, thanks for that, to me. Right, let's get to business issues, of course. Right, with Jimmy Moya, we'll do that right after this.
Greatness has a way of overcoming all the obstacles. South Africa is readmitted into the International Olympic Committee. The Afrika Dzonga flag was flown by marathoner Dan Dow at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games Barcelona 1992. Ilana Meyer rose to the occasion with a silver medallion in the women's 10,000 meters, while tennis doubles pairing of Wayne Ferreira and Pete Norval grabbed another silver.
Second and silver medalist representing South Africa,
Wayne Ferreira and Pete Norval.
Team Africa Jibembe. Magical moments of the Olympics. Brought to you by SABC Sport, proud broadcaster of the Olympic Games Paris 2024.
For the love of the game.
Yeah, we can do this. It's been a long time coming. This deserves to grow. It's a great business. If they don't like it, someone else will. And fund me so I can expand. Maybe I can offer them shares. I need to retain equity for staff. It's going to be good for recruitment. Yeah.
Possible begins with that one great idea. When Telkom enables entrepreneurs to make their ingenuity a reality, we grow local economies. Telkom. Possible begins here.
Nick is hiding a dark secret. For 20 years, everything has been going according to plan. Until now. He has the perfect wife, Maya, a smart, ambitious defense lawyer who is on the verge of becoming the first black director of public prosecutions. Amidst the biggest case of her career and having her life under intense scrutiny, Maya learns of Nick's dark secret and how she was one of Nick's targets 20 years ago. The veil of secrecy will fall. Nothing stays hidden forever. Betrayal, secrets, suspense. Oh, the drama. This is Undercover, Mondays to Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on S3. Channel your best drama with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Right, now let's get to the MoneyWeb Market Update with Jimmy Moyaha. As always, hi Jimmy. It's the weekend, but the big business moves, what are they?
Good evening, Ashraf. Good evening to the listeners. It looks as though we're closing out the week in negative territory, but not surprising. It looks as though it's just been a sea of red across the board. If we look at, starting with Asian markets, Hong Kong was down 2%, Sydney was down almost a full percent at 0.8% there. The Nikkei in Tokyo was down 0.16%. In the European markets, the DAX in Germany was down 0.9%. The CAC in France was down 0.2%, as was the FTSE. The U.S. markets at the moment are trading in the red as well. U.S. NASDAQ down 0.2%, with the S&P down 0.5% and the Dow down a 4%. Our local markets didn't fare any better. The all-share finishing out of the day 0.5% in the red. The top 40 0.5% in the red as well. Resources gave back 1.7% in today's moves, with industrials losing 0.8%. Financials were the only saving grace. They were up 0.5%, but it wasn't enough to bring the market back into the green. If we look at some of the currency movements, the rand sitting at 18.27, holding quite steady there against the US dollar for the moment. We've got 23.60 against the pound and 19.89 against the euro. 12.22 against the Australian dollar is what the rand is trading at there. If we look at some of the commodities movements, the Brent crude price still sitting at around $84.23 a barrel. Gold price all the way back down to $2,406 an ounce, down almost a full 2% there. Platinum pricing and palladium pricing also giving back some gains there. We've got a couple of things to look forward to next week. We've got interest rates out of China, we've got CPI data out of South Africa, and we have the preferred measure of inflation out of the US in the form of the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index late next week as well. So there's a couple of data points we'll be keeping an eye on to see if they will help us finish the month in stronger territory. But by all accounts, this is a negative close to the week and not where we want to be. Quick look at some of the crypto movements. Bitcoin sitting at $65,296 an ounce, while Ethereum at $3,441 a coin there, So crypto's still holding positive. They look to be the only thing in the green at the moment. We'll look to see how this picture unfolds going into next week. But for now, Ashraf, back to you and the team.
Okay, and of course you have no show tonight. That means normal 6 o'clock. So if I take it, Jimmy, your weekend starts now. Enjoy it. Thank you. Bye-bye. Right, let's get to calls. In fact, I'll do it after this.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Okay, I've asked you to give me one word that describes President Ramaphosa's speech yesterday, and then you can give me a one-line explanation. So one word, one line. That's it. I don't need a long story. Padi Lahotla said depressing. Lusanda says refreshing, I understand. Hi.
Hi, Ashraf.
Yeah, hi. How are you? You say refreshing, right? Yeah.
Yes. Refreshing because I just got a sense of incredible fresh commitment to craft a practical plan to take the nation to a higher and better level.
Okay, nice. Well, I said one word, one line, and you've done both perfectly. Yes. Much appreciated. Thanks for that, Lusanda. Thank you. There we are. Temba in Lichtenberg, hi.
Ashraf, how are you, man?
I'm very good indeed. Right, go ahead. What's your point?
Yeah, I want to say, to talk about the police unit to say, it is saying it's in the Northwest Province, near to a city. Now, what the Amnesty International is saying, there's no security and safety for us here, the older people, mostly the older people in to say. And then, example, about in the 19th of June, young church took my cell, and then when they sent for me, I was in a cafe. So I went straight to the police station to go and report this thing. I found the policeman there, told him that the young man took my cell, then he said I must come the following day. But in short, there's no security for us here in to say. I think my common sense tells me that it seems as though they are getting instructions not to help the people in to say or in the country wide. So, as I'm sitting here now, Yeah, and I watch the South African team. Every night, in the evening, in the morning, during night, they are driving up and down. I'm in the main street here. I cannot sleep at night because there's air, toxic air that comes into my rooms, my house, and then I cannot sleep at night. So I need a person like that from Amnesty International to visit me. If possible, I can give you my numbers.
Okay, what I'll do is my producer Keys will take all your details. Okay, let's see if we can follow that up. Thanks for that call, much appreciated. But there you are. I'm saying appreciated, but the fact is, people have problems and they often don't know where to go. And look, I don't know how we can always help. Sometimes just by amplifying it, but sometimes it is very much by simply saying if we can connect with the right people. Absolutely right. There's a couple of comments about the speech in voice notes. Here we are.
Hello, Ashraf. What are you doing? Now, the description for yesterday's President Ramaphosa's speech, I would say, is obvious. Yes, that's it. Obvious. This is Louis.
What's that word? Thanks for that, Louis. What's that word? It's just obvious, man. It's obvious. Okay, God. Here's another one. In fact, from obvious to number one. Here's it.
Ashraf, yesterday the speech was number one. Here we are not going to point fingers at one party. We are going to point fingers at other parties if they don't deliver what the president promised us. So I don't know those who said Ramaphosa repeat the same thing. He can repeat the same thing, but now they are working with other parties. So let us not judge here. Let us wait and see what is going to happen. Then we will judge after that. Tabuye in Kurman.
Okay. Interesting. Normally the speech is delivered by the president, but written by someone. They workshop it, right? It's not just done in the spur of the moment. I just wonder whether the written speech this time is workshopped by can I call it a multi-party group of speech writers or not, right? Here's another.
Hi, Ashraf. Good show, man. I just wanted to say the speech from President Ramaphosa was out of this world. This is what South Africa needs. Hope and nothing else. Having hope is all that we need as South Africans. And I just want to encourage every citizen to be hopeful. Let us be hopeful. Good show, man. Thanks.
Thanks for the good show compliment. Much appreciated. From depressing to nonsense to obvious to out of this world to number one. It's amazing the diversity. Well, I'm not surprised. Whoever said we all think the same way, we don't. And from hopeful to this.
Thank you. Sorry about my son from Buan. I can describe the speech from Ramaphosa yesterday as a terrible speech. Terrible. Spare from Netherlands. Thank you.
Okay, there we are. So that's another one. Terrible. Let's get to other thoughts now. Of course, you'll be aware of the ICJ advisory with regard to Israel. Lenius Mashile has got a view. Lenius, hi.
Ashraf, how are you?
I'm good indeed. Pretty well. The weekend's just about arriving in 10 minutes' time. Yeah.
Yeah, Ashraf, as the civic leaders, we really feel for the Palestinians. Because, as a revolutionary civic movement, we have actually been indicating that Israel is just a apartheid government. And really, they are actually seizing the land of the Palestinians. They are oppressing them, discriminating them, restricting them from resources that belong to them. And it's really now up to countries of the world to really live up to this advice that has been given. Mm-hmm. Although that the Committee of the United Nations, they definitely did not even need to go to get an advice from the court because it was obvious. But unfortunately, that is the process.
Okay.
So that, yeah.
Well, it is the process. So let's see what happens next. Thanks for that, Lenius. If you just tuned in late, I mean, what's happened now? The National Assembly. Now, just to tell you, this has nothing to do with the South African case of genocide against Israel. The National Assembly of the United Nations, they asked the ICJ to look into the issue of Israel and to give an advisory. And the ICJ today has advised or ruled that Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful and that it should come to an end as rapidly as possible, right? And there's more. He said specifically Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the regime associated with them have been established and are being maintained in violation of international law. There's more. There's about 5-6 points. But what it will go back to now is the United Nations, and let's see how they respond to that. We'll get to Crispin after this.
The European outfit want to interrogate African resilience, but Tanzanian champions are highly spirited to rise. German Bundesliga club FC Augsburg battles it out with Younger SC from Tanzania. This is the Mpumalanga Premiers International Cup 2024. Do not miss out on the mouth-watering clash between FC Augsburg and Young Africans on Saturday, 20 July at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. #We love it here. Tickets are available at CompuTicket. Proudly brought to you by the TS Galaxy Foundation and SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Emails, kind regards, school pickups, traffic, goals, live. Hey, kuningi. We know. But it doesn't have to be. With UNISA, you get to define your tomorrow. Why not shape your future with flexible and accessible learnings that accommodate your lifestyle? Applications for a limited number of masters and doctoral qualifications for the 2024 academic year are still open for admission. Visit unisa.ac.za for more information. UNISA, define tomorrow.
S3 is bringing you the best in Indian cinema every Sunday at 2 p.m. Laugh, dance, get drawn into the drama, revved up with the action, and maybe, just maybe, shed a little tear. Catch Gargi on the 7th of July, Selfie on the 14th, Prince on the 21st, and Laila Majnu on the 28th. It's Indian cinema like you've never seen it before. Channel your best entertainment with Indian cinema only on S3. Open up.
Do you have fresh musical talent lighting up your timeline or making waves in your community?
Well, we want to see them shine, so send their details to our WhatsApp line on 063 408 8863 and they could perform live on Expresso.
Discover the hottest new artists and be part of the excitement.
Catch Expresso weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. only on S3 and be part of the magic.
X at SFM Radio and at Ashraf Garda.
Okay, further comments on the ICJ advisory, not ruling, advisory. Crispin in Durban. Hello, Crispin.
Hello, Ashraf. So I think this is a moment where I would really like to ask Jewish leadership in South Africa to take a stand for the rights of people. And when I say that, I'm so aware of the absolutely remarkable Jewish leaders of South Africa, from Solly Sachs to people like Helen Suzman, whom I knew, and people like Ruth First, who took the experience of oppression and brutality against them and turned that into a weapon to identify with the oppressed. Unfortunately, there's another strain, represented largely by official bodies, that has gone out of its way to historically align itself with the National Party authorities during apartheid, to pretend to be more liberal than they actually were, to have even lied about supporting anti-apartheid movements when they were donating money to the National Party. And we still have that. We still have some Jewish leaders in South Africa who are saying, Israel represents Western values. I don't know what Western values they're thinking about. You know, what colonialism, slavery, imperialism.
Okay, I hear you. We're gonna have to move on. Time's against us, but effectively you've put out a challenge, right? And the ball is in their court. I hear all the things you've said, and it's a challenge. Thanks for that call, Crispin. Thank you. Right, let me just say this. So you may have heard the story of that Twitter account called Ghulam, right? And this week, so we don't know who this person is, but this person seems to have the expose on everything, particularly around the ANC, like as if he's like sitting in the office of I don't know what, right? Anyway, the Independent Online this week gave out a name and said that we've now found out that Ghulam belongs to a person called Mohammed Yaqub Vauda, who's a University of UKZN lecturer. He was also a part-time comedian, I understand, and they gave out his name. Subsequently, they retracted and had an apology to say they got the wrong person. There's another Vauda with a different person completely, and that's the person. I see in the meantime, Ghulam himself has said he's going on holiday because he's had a threat on his life, and he's talking about a 3 million rand hit. So he's going, but we still don't physically know who a Ghulam really is. But in the meantime, the Mohammed Yaqub Vauda has sent out this voice note.
Hello, this is Mohammed Vauda. Just to talk about my ordeal that went on Monday. Right through till Wednesday. It was quite a difficult thing to go through, obviously being accused of running a Twitter account. Well, now I learned it's an X account called Ghulam MV. Obviously knowing that I'm innocent and didn't have anything to do with this or any connection at all. It really took a toll on me and my family. So when I first learned about this, my whole world turned upside down because first I thought it was a prank, and thereafter I realized this was really, really serious because I got immediate death threats to me and my family, where I had to take my family, put them in a secure location, and myself go into hiding because I learned that there was a 250,000 rand hit on my head, and a lot of other people trying to get to me. So it was turmoil. Obviously, I went through isolation, which I was alone and had these really bad thoughts, and I found it very difficult to cope with that. And then I found that a lot of people were supportive of me because knowing my personality, they knew that I was not able to do something like this against anybody. And so after that, I found the Kifness, who contacted me, and he got me this amazing contact, Tony, who then put me in contact with Rupert Candy and Ben Winks, who have been such an amazing legal team. They put together this letter of demand and demanded an apology and took my part, and it took a few days to get them to respond, but by Wednesday they sent out an official apology. But in that time I went through many difficulties and a lot of people searching for me, and it was crazy to know that there was a bounty on my head. But I'm happy that the apology was sent out, although I'm not happy with the way the apology was sent out, and therefore we sent a second letter of demand, and we've now officially sent out a summons to the IOL and the people involved as well. So I'm hoping for a positive result, because it's a case of defamation as well. So having said that, I am happy that I have now cleared my name, and hopefully everything goes back to normal in a few weeks. But I've lost a few gigs as a stand-up comedian, and my job was affected because I couldn't go to work, and I haven't seen my kids since Monday. I'm hoping I can see them soon, but yeah, just follow the story on my Instagram and TikTok at mo.vauda. And I'm so grateful for everybody's support, and I'm very much grateful to my legal team. Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, that's Mohammed Yaqub Vauda, not Ghulam, as we've been told, and an apology has come through. Phew, what a story. But then the question is, who is the real Ghulam? We still don't really know. That's the show. Great that you're a part of it. Great production team putting it all together. Thanks for the engagement all day and throughout the week as well. You can continue the engagement just by tweeting out, even just now. Still use that, the National Policy. But I see it. I probably will respond to it. I'm sure I will, in fact. Okay, so after the news, I think Oliver Dixon gets into the hot seat. But let's get the news now at 6. It's Greg Coase.
Thank you again, Ashraf. Mackenzie hits back at Hlophe Law comments and SA bank users affected by global IT glitch. Good evening. The Sports, Arts and Culture Minister